Well, this is a big event for the channel, guys. It's a big event. It's one that I've personally been looking forward to. Out of all the shows I've done with Simon, and recently the shows that we've had with Brad, and going back to even the shows that we did early on when the channel started with Carl, this is certainly one show that is very, very dear to my own heart. I love this album. I love the era and the time that album represents, and I certainly look forward to spending some time with my co-hosts Simon and Brad talking about the album, and also our friends in the chat. So if you guys haven't already subscribed to our channel, please do. We would appreciate your support. If you haven't checked out Brad's channel, we'll be flicking his website through the course of the show. He would appreciate any support you can give him too. Check him out on social media, and also check out his music, because Simon and I are lucky to have him, because, you know, he's a performing musician that plays a lot of the music that we discuss. And I'm not speaking for Simon, but I'll certainly speak for myself at a higher degree than what I can ever do. So,
me too.
Oh, you're a gigging musician too. So I was just being modest for you.
Thank you so much. No need. I can be. I know my place.
Look, guys, it's a pleasure to have you here. I sincerely mean that. This show is probably one that's been on, certainly Simon in my mind, for a while, as far as planning and talking and discussing and deep diving. And we're kind of lucky to have Brad, who's a deep diver himself, join us. So yeah. So we'll do a round table, guys. So Simon, just give us a brief synopsis on what this album means to you, if it means anything to you. Yeah. Share those thoughts, and yeah, and hopefully during the course of the chat too, we want to stay kind of focused, guys, but we'll try and answer any questions and highlight anything in the chat. But yeah, we'll always get back to what's happening in the chat.
Yes. Good morning, DTube. How you doing? Hope you're good. Thanks for joining. We've got so yeah. Today we are discussing the great Layla, another Assorted Love Songs by Derek and the Dominoes. Of course, Eric Clapton and Bobby Whitlock, Carl Radle, and Jim Gordon. And so yeah, I don't know if you, I got this as well the other day.
Yeah,
yeah, which is really good, fantastic, kind of stretching out and stuff. So Derek and the Dominoes, recorded in 1970, as we said, with Clapton, Bobby Whitlock, Carl Radle, and Jim Gordon. Offers. I mean, I first came across it probably pretty much when it came out, 71, 72.
Oh, I mean, wow, really?
When I was, yeah, well,
you're lucky.
72. Well, when I was 72, 73, we used to go on a Wednesday night. We used to go, there was like a sort of a disco in Bristol where I live. And for one night only, it was like a rock disco. Wednesday nights was rock disco night. In the days when you could have such a thing. So we used to go to it, and one of the songs they played Layla all the time. You know, this is just a couple of years later. Yeah. You know, it was already a kind of, you know, a classic tune, and they would play Layla, you know, amongst, you know, Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin and whatever else, Physical Graffiti, Trampled Underfoot, and that sort of thing. So I've been aware of it and been aware of the album since I started listening to music in 72, really, which I know it's been out for a couple of years after that, a year and a half. So you know, it's been around my life. One of my my oldest friend from school, Tony, when he got married, they played it at their wedding. They played the piano bit at the wedding, which is really cool. So yeah, it's for me, it's just part of the fabric of my musical existence, and not
Awesome.
something I discover. It's not something I necessarily discovered later. I mean, a bit later, but pretty much discovered at the time. You know, I must admit it's been lovely to go back and listen to it again, because I can't remember the last time I listened to it. I haven't listened to it for a lot of years. You know, you're getting embroiled on other stuff and don't listen to it. You know, and it's how much I'd forgotten, which is great. So it's a bit like returning it almost as a new record. Because
What about you,
but
Brad?
For me,
When did you first become aware of the album?
when I first became aware of this record, I went backwards to this record, to be honest with you. I was, I had a few Clapton things. I had some Yardbirds Clapton, and I had later stuff. And the cream of Eric Clapton, that was that album itself had Layla on it, obviously because it's probably one of his biggest tracks. And I went backwards from there, and I bought this record way back when I first started buying CDs. I actually bought it, believe it or not, for $10 Australian. So I've still got the price tag on here. But once I connected with this album, that's pretty much all I listened to of Eric Clapton for years, because everything else just seemed to like it. There was just something about it, and I didn't know at the time, but I realised now Dane Allman was a big part of it as well, the overall guitar. So at the time, I just associated guitar with Eric Clapton, but but it, like, to cut the story short, it was the cream of Eric Clapton that got me into this record, and which is like a greatest hits. I don't know if you've seen the cream.
Yeah, absolutely.
But obviously Cream and all that I was into. And then I got into Clapton later period and went backwards from there into the 70s era, which to me, this is, I don't know, it's probably the most epic record for me, for Clapton. And Clapton's a massive influence to me as a guitarist, blues wise, just the blues side of things. I mean, there's Stevie Ray, there's Gary Moore, and there's Eric Clapton, you know what I mean? It's, and then you go backwards to their favourites, obviously the Albert King, Albert Collins, B.B. King, the Kings, you know. But Clapton,
the Three Kings,
the Clapton influence for me has been massive, and I always go back to this record. It's a great driving record if you're ever going on a long trip. You can just put it on and you get lost. It's a great record, and I must admit, it's one of those records you've got to put on and listen to it in its entirety.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the interesting things about this record is, looking at the cover and seeing it in my uncle's record collection. I've mentioned this to Simon a few times, Brad, on the show, that, going to my uncle's and having a look at his record collection when you're a young guy and putting this album on. And it's like Exile on Main Street, Simon and Brad. I didn't understand it when I was 13, 14 years old. I knew who Eric Clapton was, but I didn't understand any of this music. And it wasn't until much later, much later, that I became a fan of it. And as we draw out a little bit of our experiences and our research through the show, one of the reasons why I probably didn't want to listen to it for a long time is because it had Layla on there, and it was the radio song. It was like the Lay Down Sally. But now the two of us and everyone in the chat, we've promised that we're always going to be honest when we do these shows. So don't be upset with some of the things that we say because we're trying to be honest. But I, for a long time, didn't like Layla because it was the radio song. So anything that had anything to do with this album. But again, it wasn't until probably about 2005 when the Cream reunion came out, where I went to some friends' places and we were just jamming and mucking around. And I actually listened to the album from like Brad just said, from the two albums, and I just thought the two records, sorry, and I just fell in love with it, and I've been a fan ever since.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that one of the things that struck me doing this is you realise that the best known song on the album is the second last song on the album. I mean, who else? I mean, not they knew, but you kind of I can't think of another album where the best song on it, I mean, the most famous, but not the best song, but the most famous song is the second to last song on the album. I can't think of an album where that's the case at all.
Well, I can tell you. I can tell you one experience. I remember listening to half the album when Goodfellas came out. Now, when did Goodfellas came out? That was 1990, 91.
The Scorsese film.
Yeah, and that was around the time that they had the 20th anniversary collection, which is this thing here, this box here, and I stole this from my friend. I stole it. I still owe him some money for it. Yes, I do. I know, and he knows who he is.
Oh,
but
should we name names?
But sitting down watching that film, and that's when Henry's getting busted, and freaking out, and everyone's getting shot. I can't remember exactly what the scene. It's a great movie, and then you've got that piano bit, Simon, come in, and it's just, isn't it just wonderful what it can do? But obviously we can talk a little bit more about that song, because I didn't realise until later on that that piano bit was added, which is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a sort of a sort of completely different thing there. So I was just writing something down.
I think when this album came out, the music that was coming out just prior to this record, and like George Harrison, we're talking, and Abbey Road, and those records that were coming out around the time, they all had a certain element of feel similar to this, but this one's very unique in itself because it's got, we'll go into it obviously when we dive deep into it, there's something about this era that was quite magic, and I don't know, it's hard to describe. When I'm listening to this record, it's like a time capsule. You can go back and listen to records around that same time, and I'll mention it in some of the songs. Like, they remind me of other artists, but they're not. They've captured their own sound. But that era, they all sort of had that thing. I don't know what it was. It must have been the substances they were taking or something. But there was a certain element of music that was. I actually think it's more of a purity. There was more pureness in the music on this record, and obviously we'll delve into it with the songs. But this was a man that was bleeding.
Yeah.
This record.
Absolutely, yeah. It's, yes, out of great pain comes great art. Yes.
Exactly.
And we can't forget, obviously, too, Simon and Brad, the American influence on that album, because the band, they're Americans, aren't they? And it's just this theme that we like to talk about, how these British guys mesh and meld and intertwine with these American guys, and this universal music. That they were touring and singing some of the songs on this album through the UK. In the windy UK during winter time, you just couldn't get a contrast, can you, of songs and venues? Just wonderful.
That's a weird thing about they went out kind of incognito and just played in kind of clubs and things, and kind of without just Eric wouldn't allow his name on the billboards to sell it. It's just odd.
So Simon,
Although I consider where we are, but
I think the key thing for us, if we're going to place a little bit of history on the album, I think the key thing is your presentation and discussion on the famous house band that George Harrison had. You know, not bad,
Well,
not a bad house band, eh?
well, but going back, because really they were Delaney and Bonnie's, house band, really, and George Harrison, invited them to come to London.
Yeah.
Because obviously he joined the Delaney and Bonnie, tour. So it's him, Eric Clapton, amazing, kind of, standing at the back. Like you hardly give it credit, would you, for something as slightly as bizarre as that? And and Harrison said, "Come to London. Let's form a band. We'll do a record. I'm doing." Yes, All Things Must Pass. Which is which if anyone doesn't know it, is like a companion piece to Derek and the Dominos. Is I'm going to say the best solo Beatles record. They are.
Yeah, but Harrison's invite though wasn't to Delaney and Bonnie. It was only
it was to the boys, wasn't it? Whitlock,
Yeah.
Rattle, and Gordon. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because by then they'd worked out Delaney and Bonnie were a little bit weird.
So didn't Roy Whitlock say that they thought they started acting like they were stars, and and because of that they sort of like so, but just going back a bit, one of the things that amazed me about this was that obviously that very kind of, as you said, Andrew, electric blues, southern gospel influence, and also that they brought to that amazing kind of American feel to it as a record. But I was just thinking about it. I was talking about last night that in 4 years, Eric Clapton did the Blues Breaker. He did 3 Cream albums. He did the first Eric Clapton solo record. He did Blind Faith, and he did Derek and the Dominos. I mean, and before he was 25.
Yep.
I just like to say it, which I think is an astonishing kind of artistic, and taught a lot as well. It's astonishing artistic output, really, isn't it? By anybody's standards. The amount.
Think about like guitar players like myself, like you guys, are all still trying to learn the licks from the blues records and Layla and all these songs. We're learning those licks that he used to do back when he was in his 20s. So he was far ahead of his time. He was hard to.
Yeah.
A lot of the artists from that era were young, and so if you watch that Life in 12 Bars movie, you realise he had quite a turbulent sort of upbringing and quite torturous at times for young kids. So I think that carried through all of his alcohol use, his drug use, alcohol use as well. Like he carried that burden, But anyway,
for sure. No, for sure. I think that's right. And it's kind of
saying he achieved so much in that short period of time. The output of stuff.
Yeah.
I and this is one of the reasons why I think Layla is probably the important one, because it's the album that he wanted to do desperately that he couldn't do on these other albums, and that's no disrespect to the Cream albums and what he achieved with Blind Faith, but if we take into account what Clapton said himself, he just wanted to get in and be in a band, he just didn't want to be a virtuoso and doing virtuoso stuff, wanted to be in a band, which is something that we're all a little bit familiar with, and we all kind of understand the reasons why.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that was the whole thing about going on tour with, anonymously with Delaney and Bonnie, wasn't it? It was that whole thing about, I just want to be in the band and play guitar, and kind of, it was the whole thing about calling yourself Derek and not Eric.
What do you think, Simon, about the fact, though, that, Eric said that it was pretty embarrassing, that Blind Faith had to follow Delaney and Bonnie because, when you look at the band that Delaney and Bonnie had, they had Jim Keltner, they had Bobby Key, they had a hot band, Rita Coolidge and
Two drummers.
Blind
Two
Faith.
drummers.
And Blind Faith were going on, and they just weren't even talking to each other, and they were just getting blown off the stage. It's just like, no wonder you want to go and join the other band.
Well, yeah. No wonder you do. Yes. Well, you obviously see them having a great time. You know, kind of. You know, it's obviously quite a lot of them. As you said, Rita Coolidge, and you've got two drummers, and you've got, so you're cooking up a storm, aren't you, with two drummers? There's yes.
Oh yeah,
the Allman Brothers had, was it the Allman Brothers? They had two drummers as well, didn't they, for a bit? So it's obviously a southern thing to have two drummers, but but so you go and obviously there's not nearly so much pressure on the support band. So I could see Eric stands on the side, see all these guys having a great time. Thinks, I'll just get my guitar, stand over here, and no one will know. We'll be good.
Well, isn't that what it's about, guys? Isn't it about having a bit of fun? Yes, I know it's a business, but if you're not having fun,
I think that in 1970. You're still in very much the kind of artistic endeavor thing. There is obviously there is the music business, but it's not the same in 1970 as it is in 1990. There is still the element of, and we discuss it a lot on these shows, and it still pertains, I think, that the sort of the thing of the gang. You go out with your mates and you play music and stuff, and that's what you do, and you make records, and that's how it works. And as we state on here, the classic cases are, the Eagles. If you watch the Eagles documentary, they changed from being a gang to being a business, and clearly there's a clear demarcation in that when they come back, when hell froze over, and they got back to that it then was a business. And not a bunch of guys playing music. Incidentally, did some fantastic songs and made a lot of money, and and out of that comes business. So I think that very much that's a hi, Mickey, how you doing? that thing about being in a gang was what Eric wanted. He wanted to just go out and play music.
Oh, big time. Big time, and that's one of the reasons why he was just so adamant, wasn't he, that it was just going to be, Derek and the Dominoes, and we all know, some of those stories, where they just stopped when they were on tour in the UK and just in America too, and just made it very clear and kind of upset the management. But at the end of the day, that's probably, Simon, where maybe the artists had a bit of pullback then too.
I think that's right. I think back then they absolutely did. Can't
upset the boy.
Can't upset the talent, isn't it? Isn't that the phrase? Don't upset the talent. So I think absolutely that that is the case, and he was they were all able to sort of pull it off, weren't they? I mean, even George Harrison was able to pull off going and playing with Delaney and Bonnie for a bit, and because he probably didn't have a manager. He probably might have had a manager, but not overtly had a manager. Escaped the Beatles, escaped the Alan Klein handcuffs, and all of that, and kind of did what he wanted to do, which is it must be amazing to have that feeling, as an artist, to be able to go, well, if I want to go out and play with them, I'll just go out and play with them, and Eric's always like that, isn't he? I mean, Eric's always been like, who's it? Joe Bonamassa said that when Clapton played with him at the Albert Hall in 2009, I think, he said, Clapton, never mind, Clapton just turned up in his own car with a Fender Tweed or whatever, Tweed Deluxe and a Strat, put it on the stage and plugged in. He just turned up himself. It's like, because for him, that's still actually the fun of it. I've got my own kit. I can carry my own gear. I'll turn up, amp in one hand, guitar in the other. We're good, and then he sounded like Eric Clapton. How does that even work? But because he doesn't have too much. He doesn't have loads of pedal boards and stuff like that. It's basically, the hands of God into on a Fender Stratocaster into a Fender Tweed Deluxe, whatever. And I think that's really his thing, isn't it, Andrew? That's what he wants, and he feels most comfortable. Turn up on his own, plug in, play.
Oh, look, I agree, and Brad's probably a good, probably can give us a little bit of a idea on what it's like just to turn up with an amp and plug in and play. It's probably, a daunting thing for a lot of musicians these days. I take my hat off to the musicians that kind of do it, but again, Simon, I think it goes back to that whole zeitgeist of that era of just I think we're going to go all over the place with this show, and that's fine. But it's a little bit like when Eric turned up at Criterion, and we all know the story. Tom Dowell was expecting these big, huge Marshall amps because that's what he engineered when he was with Cream. So he's expecting these truckloads of amps to come in, and Eric just turns up with a Fender Champ and a pig nose, and they go scratching their head, going, "What the heck's going on here?"
Yeah. See. Well, and in a sense, in 1969, he turns up, Criterion Studios with that. In 2009, he turns up at the Albert Hall, pretty much doing the same thing, doesn't he? Like 40 years later. Excuse me.
Would you do that, Brad? Would you just turn up with a Fender Champ to a gig and just say, "Mike the sucker"?
I just rock up and go, "Where do you want me to play?"
Brad's turned up with his Marshalls. What do you think this is?
Oh!
Brad is not old school. He's new school. Therefore, he turned up with gear, a man to carry them, and Marshalls. Which. So I think there's. Whereas Andrew, I have done it. I've turned up with my Tweed, PV Delta Blues, not a Fender, but let's not quibble, with my PV Delta Blues and my Strat. See, I can do Clapton, no problems at all. Just give me a plug, I'm good. I spend most of my time not playing with any effects, just playing plug directly into the amp. I really like that. As a thing, it's I'm fine with that. It just. I've got 2 channels. So I've got a drive channel, but don't tell anyone. I don't go there much.
Yeah, I think it's remarkable that these guys did that, and all credit, I suppose, to George Harrison, for getting these guys because, Simon and I have done a couple of shows early on, guys, if you haven't already seen them. But just check out Bobby Whitlock's YouTube channel. And again, a couple of days ago, he released another video celebrating the 50th anniversary. And he mentions the fact too. And he clears a couple of little of the urban myths out too that we'll probably talk about. But one of the key things, though, is George Harrison, I think, just getting these guys, saying to them, "Look, if you come and play with me, with my band, be my band, I'll give you some studio time." So what are these guys going to do?
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's go and hang out with George.
That's right. He was saying, Whitlock, wasn't he, that he was trying to get a deal together with I can't remember the name of the producer, but he was trying to to do their own stuff and kind of thing and do it. Just come back, yeah. The other incident that struck me, and I hadn't really sort of put this together until I was starting this, was that Harrison had the same. His musical influences, particularly Dylan and the band and things, and obviously I knew about Dylan, but the band not so much. But that he was on that same kind of kick as Eric about.
Good point.
And there's that famous story. Clapton goes to see the band in the Big Pink and says, "Let's jam," and they say, "We don't jam, we write songs." It's a different ethos completely for that. It's not about so.
Which in itself's a little bit interesting because that's the ethos that Bobby and Eric wanted to have, and in fact,
started
come
off
on.
having.
Let's just talk about it as it comes to mind. So, you know, that they already had half a dozen of those songs, and that was something that I wasn't aware of until I read Bobby Whitlock's autobiography and saw his videos, that they were going to record that album without Dwayne. Dwayne came in and
Afterthought,
perhaps,
wasn't he?
you know, Brad will mention that, I suppose, in his intervention and introduction. But so they weren't going to have a jam album, but Dwayne Orban comes in there and they have some jam songs. So that's one of the reasons why that album's so bloody cool, because it's got elements of that Big Pink thing going on and songwriting, you know, and some sincere songs, and then you've got you know, Key to the Highway.
Do you think, Andrew, that it starts off as one thing and goes into another thing? My impression is that if you take the first three songs, which is just the four of them,
Yeah.
it's just them, and you go, okay, I Looked Away, Bob Blues, keep on going, okay, fine, yeah. And then you get, then they get Dwayne Allman. So then then it turns into a different thing. And so in effect, you know, we can discuss this about, can you make up a single album which is much less Dwayne heavy, if you like, you know, and would that be a completely different thing to, as you say, you've got all those kind of classic blues songs and stuff, and, you know, and what are in effect covers.
I agree.
Harking back to the kind of Cream thing, isn't it? Almost harking back to that Cream thing, but in a band context. You know, still doing those songs and still jamming and doing it. And I think that we could just that's something to think about. I think I did, because it did strike me about whether it started off being one record and then metamorphosed into another record, kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably what's happened, and what's really interesting is that we all knew that Dwayne Allman had an influence on that album. To what degree does he have that influence? And then when you go and listen to what Bobby Whitlock has to say, you know, he said that, you know, Dwayne Allman was a very structured player. He was a session guy. You know, he was, but he's not been mean, you know, about Dwayne Allman at all. You know, so these are just observations that Bobby's giving us for us to reflect on and for us to chat about. So I suppose since we're talking about Dwayne, maybe Brad, because I'm mindful Brad hasn't said anything. I suppose Brad should jump in and start talking about Dwayne Allman, because we're talking about him. So give us something to continue talking about.
Intently listening and jump in, guys, because you guys know a lot about this record as well. So if there's something that I'm overlooking that you think's worth bringing up, jump in. But Dwayne Allman was pretty much brought in because, well, I mean, as it turned out, Tom Dowd, who were you going to talk about Tom Dowd and his?
Yeah.
Carry on, Brad.
Bring
them all in as you like. Yeah, sorry.
Was brothers recording a record with the Allman Brothers, and from my understanding and the research I've done, Clapton wanted to start recording a record in Miami, and he rang Tom and said, "I want to book some time with you," and because Tom was working with the Allman Brothers, Dwayne overheard it or got in, you know, caught wind of what was happening and said he wanted to drop by and meet Eric Clapton. Like, he wanted to try and meet him and see if that was a possibility. He said to Tom, you know, I'd love to swing by while he's recording and see what's happening. Obviously, he goes, like, if Clapton's okay with that, I'd love to do that. So Allman, you know, a bit further down the track, was later called Tom and said his band was performing at a benefit concert, which was on the 26th of August, I've written down. And they were in the process of recording the Layla. Well, they were in the sessions at that point. I think they were like brick walled a little bit. They were having problems. Not necessarily with, there was something, from my understanding, they just felt like there was something not quite clicking or something with the session. They were feeling a little bit brick walled. But from my understanding, Clapton found out. Well, Tom Dowd said to the guys, "Oh, Allman Brothers are playing tonight, a benefit concert." Clapton found out and he instantly insisted that they were all going. He goes, I think in his exact words, which I've written down here, and then the guy that plays on the back of the Wilson Pickett Hey Jude song, we want to go see him play. Let's go. Like there was no question in his mind that they were not going to that session, that gig. And obviously they organised to get in there, and I think Clapton and Tom Dowd and all that, because Tom Dowd had worked with the Allman Brothers on at that stage 2 records, and so they got up the front, and apparently Wayne Allman was like, or they were already performing when they got seated, and apparently he was like in the middle of a solo, and if you watch Wayne Allman play, he plays with his eyes shut, and a lot of great guitarists do, like he's playing with his eyes shut, and he turns around, opens his eyes, and he sees Eric Clapton, and he just literally locked up, like froze. Like, I mean, you're playing guitar, Clapton sitting there watching you, and Clapton probably would have, knowing full well what he was like in that time frame, would have been either just a frozen stare or it would have been a sheepish sort of look about him. He would have just been, I mean, there's no record of how he was watching, but I believe he would have just been frozen. But Clapton was in awe of him. He just loved his playing, and that was something that he felt at that point that this guy, I want to meet him. I want to jam with this guy. Like there was this, he just felt that towards Wayne Allman. So yeah, apparently, like after the show, apparently when Wayne Allman was locked up, he couldn't continue on. Dickie Bett just had to keep taking over on the guitar because I just couldn't play properly, and I thought that was funny because
good old Dickie, eh? Good old Dickie, man.
Someone's got to keep it going.
Apparently, Eric was there too, and he was sort of playing his back to him a little bit because he didn't want to get Clapton watching him play, which I can understand. He'd just be overwhelmed. He'd just be like, "Oh my god!" But anyway, so after the show, they went back to backstage, and Clapton met Wayne Allman and asked him to come back to the studio. Clapton said, "Make sure you bring your guitars. Like, bring your guitar." He goes, "You've got to play on this record." Like, he knew after he watched him perform that was.
Hey, Sonia.
That was the link he needed on the record, So they got together. Apparently they had a jam session one night, just trading licks, swapping guitars, trading ideas, talking guitar geek stuff, and just fun. And I think that's sort of, if we know a Clapton that period of time.
Can I just interrupt you there, Brad? I just before you go on. So the jams, they released the jams on the 20th anniversary box set of Layla. And I've got the Jams CD, and if you guys haven't already checked out the Jams, I think the Jams are available on YouTube. So if you guys haven't heard, isn't that amazing, Brad and Simon? These are guys that have never played together, that have had a couple of scotches, a couple of joints. They're in the studio and they're playing. Isn't that, if you guys haven't heard it, isn't that phenomenal?
You see, I think that's part of the culture. Then, it's part of that. That Clapton, that jamming culture. A lot of those bands had. Now, do you know that thing about Duane Allman not being a jammer? I don't quite understand that, because if you go in the studio and you start playing, he must be able to just play stuff, and he can't. I suppose there's a structure because there's a song structure, but
I'm sure there's parts where he is just playing on this seat of his pants. He's right on the edge of the seat, ready to fall off. But he because he's Duane Allman, he could do it. He was pushing himself. I think, which I was going to talk about in the songs later, but I think they pushed each other But they obviously had a connection. There was chemistry there on guitars. They understood each other. They really admired each other's techniques and their ability as a guitarist. So I made note of that. They had a mutual respect for each other technically, but also their ability. Like, obviously, Dwayne was a slightly different American sort of blues rock, sort of classic rock guitar player, and Clapton was more like blues orientated. Like, he was dipped into the blues, and obviously with all of his Cream background and the Yardbirds and all that, like he'd come up through all that. So their style.
I think it's also that Dwayne is a slide player, Brad, as well, isn't it? You know, there's a very clear demarcation between Clapton fingers and Allman doing the slide stuff.
But they obviously became inseparable because that's cool because you can hear that in their playing together.
Oh yeah, and I think what kind of blows me away too is that Bobby Whitlock said, you know, when they went back to the motel room, and there's some photos there that's in the record that Bobby took of them playing. He said it was amazing. He was sitting back there and he was watching Eric and Dwayne, and they were playing note for note. But what these guys were doing, and I think this is sometimes we forget this, they were questioning and backing up everything by talking about the albums. They were talking about Robert Johnson. They were talking about these black guys. They were naming what songs on the album. So they were establishing their credentials within each other, saying, okay, this guy knows his shit. You know, this guy's been listening, you know, as well as playing it. So, you know, all... And how old were these guys, Simon? You said it before.
25. Well, Eric Clapton's 25.
You know, so in their early 20s, and they know all this. So, you know, besides being great musicians, they must have been intellectually up here, smart.
But didn't they? The clear thing about it, Bobby Whitlock says in one of his things, doesn't he, that Clapton had everything. He had all the records. You know, we went to his house. He had all the records. He had all the Big Bull, Brunsey, you know, Muddy Waters, Robert Johnson. He had all the records. He was like a real musicologist in terms of researching the blues and knowing about it and things like that. I think I've heard the same thing about Paul McCartney in a way. Paul McCartney knows every B-side of every rock and roll song you've ever heard. You know, can play it all. Was quite funny, but so obviously musicology is part of that, and we know, don't we? Because when Clapton was in the Blues Breakers, he spent 6 months at John Mayall's, you know, going through John Mayall's extensive blues record collection, you know, investigating it in depth. Andrew, I just wanted to ask you a question about the jams. Do they fill in any gaps for you musically? You know.
I'm glad you asked that question, because I think you have to, because okay, so we're going to jump a little bit ahead, but that's okay. You know, we're cool. We're hanging out. So Dwayne Allman, for a lot of us, was the secret sauce, the secret juice, wasn't he? You know, he was the guy that came on and he added the slide, and Eric Clapton spoke about it too. But what's really interesting is you listen to Bobby Whitlock, and Bobby Whitlock doesn't have that kind of twist on it. He thinks, you know, that they were going along okay. You know, they were doing okay. You know, and what they could have done would have been okay. But Dwayne came on. Oh, okay, so that's fine. But for me, the jams indicate to me how good the Allman Brothers were, you know, because there's a couple of jams there where Greg is playing as well. He came back, you know. One of the drummers didn't bother coming back, but it's a tight unit, and it just amazes me how deep these guys are and how good they are. And there's also this connection too, Simon, about the way that they look, because Eric Clapton said that he was in awe, you know, of these Allman Brothers. You know, they had beards, they had long hair, they were all tall and skinny. You know, they looked, you know, if you went up to them and told them you can't park there, they'd kind of throw you away, you know. They'd say, we can park anywhere we want. You know, he kind of liked that attitude too that they had. I
No
think
claws.
we've called it swagger. Is it swagger? Is that the way that you describe it?
Yeah. Certainly swagger. Yeah. So that's interesting. I didn't realise that Greg and some of the other Allman Brothers. What did did Dickie Betts go back and jam with them as well, Andrew? Was it?
So just hold on. I'll grab the.
That's good. Yeah.
Just hold on. Okay, so. Well, you guys carry on while I grab that information, because I'd like this to be a podcast too, guys. So, and we are streaming on our Facebook group too. So, if I didn't mention that, we've had a couple of comments from a Facebook user early on too in the chat saying hi. They love the album as well. So,
cool. Kubrick Lover, Greg Allman is not on the album. So I was interested to hear that he was on some of the jam, some of the outtake jam stuff that they had, but he's not on the record.
Yeah. So on jam 1, 2, 3, on jam 5, you've got Dwayne Allman, Dickie Betts, Bobby Whitlock, Clapton, of course, Greg Allman, Barry Oakley. Wow, what a monster bass player! And you've got Butch Trucks on drums, and then on jam 5, you've got Clapton, Allman, Carl. But apparently, on my research, Simon and Brad, there's about 4 or 5 unreleased jams as well. So I don't know when we're going to get that. I thought maybe we might have got that on the 50th anniversary.
Is that not on the book? There's some extra songs on the box set, aren't there? For sure.
Yeah, extra songs, but none of the jams from the research that I've done. But I suppose when we come back for part 2. But So it's nice to know that Dwayne was there and the core element of the Allman Brothers.
Yeah,
and that's interesting. So that they all come back and they jam, but with the. With Derek and the Dominoes, and it feels like that jamming changed the course of where the album was going to go. But you're right, Whitlock's, he's not. He thought they were doing fine, didn't he? They had the first 3 or 4 songs laid down without Dwayne, just the 4 of them. And they'd obviously played live and done that, and
I guess that just shows you, like, from one person's perspective to another person's, like. Something else sort of going on in the back of his head when he was doing this record. He wanted something else, and Whitlock was like, "No,
hey Rick,
perfect. This is what I think."
Hey Rick,
yeah. But Clapton was always searching. I think anyway, his personality was searching for something that was always not quite achievable, including women. So, yeah.
Do you think it's authenticity, guys, that he's that he's looking for? It's obviously, well, it's something that's burning in his creative being that he's looking for, isn't he?
I think so. Yeah, I think that it's definitely. Clapton has always been about authenticity, hasn't he? That with that musicology thing we were talking about just now, that the scholarly approach to it speaks of a man who's interested in the authenticity of, if you're going to play the blues, you're going to play the blues, and the blues is all about authenticity. And in a sense, this record is in many ways the perfect blues record, because it's he's a man in anguish and pain, and if there are only 2 words that can be applied to the blues, it's anguish and pain, isn't it?
Can I ask you guys this question, because I'm glad you mentioned it, and it was a question I always wanted to ask, so I'm going to ask it now. So do you think, Brad and Simon, do you think deep down somewhere in Hurtwood, Eric was pleasantly surprised and happy that Paddy had spurned him, that he was desperate for her, and she didn't want him, and she told him to get lost, and so he's actually feeling this pain. Do you think he's kind of happy that is going through that.
You mean because it fuels his art?
Yeah. Yeah, you know.
Not so much at the time, but maybe he's appreciative for going through that now because it spurred on his process of doing this album. You know, this might not have come to what it is today without that experience. So it always stems back to life experience and what sometimes you do things. And I know this for a fact, like with my EP that I did, a lot of it's bookending certain parts of my life of lessons that I went through that were hurtful, and then you move on from it. It's like you're bookending it to a sense. That's just what boy Andrew, but I personally think at the time, maybe his personality was he wanted to feel pain, and he was setting himself up a lot for that, you know, without even realizing he just used to do that, and not intentionally, but a cycle of things because of his upbringing. When you think about even from a child onwards, you know, he's always suffered. He's had a suffering childhood, as like a good, loving relationship with the people that him up. Not saying he didn't, but there was always some sense of pain and anguish there. And this record is basically written about his bleeding heart for a woman that he can't have, George Harrison's wife.
You know. Well, you know. So let's be, you know, fair there. You know, you know that's. But look, I understand love is love too, and lust is lust, and all those kind of things. I'm a bluesman. I can experience and understand those things.
The rake of Hamilton.
but what one of the theories that I want to talk to you guys about is that you know, Eric Clapton purposely wanted Patty, not because of Patty, but because she was the wife of a very close friend, and he knew that was going to be some kind of juice that was going to do something as far as him and his music. Now the reason why I mention, I thought I had the book handy because that's not my theory too, by the way, guys. That's a theory by this guy here, in his book, Edge of Darkness, Christopher Sanford. He talks about that, and I think one of the reasons why this book is probably not spoken about by some fans is because it asks some of those difficult questions that fans like us like to discuss. You know, because does it have an effect on the music? Was there some master plan?
Well, and there is the theory, isn't it, that, you know, that artists will deliberately upend their personal lives to get something out of it. You know, artistically,
yes,
and stuff. You know, that's certainly. I don't know if that happens here. I don't know if that's.
Bob Dylan's done that.
Surely not. His Bobness? Are you saying that his Bob? Let's not get onto it.
That's another show. That's that's another show, guys.
The T's and T's of Bob Dylan. Yeah. You've only got to watch the. Have you seen the Martin Scorsese, the Rolling Thunder review thing?
Yes.
I mean, you know, your wife, your ex-lover. You know, your ex-wife, got Joan Baez, Sarah Dillon. It's like, what is going on there? Except, you know, Dylan messing it up. Anyway, let's not go there.
I think Kubrick's right, though. We have to take Eric at his word. Eric said that he was in love with her, so ultimately we have all these theories, but, you know, we take Clapton at his word, don't we?
And out of that came, you know, some great art, basically. Yes, I think it'd be hard. I've never seen a case for, you know, he deliberately did all this stuff to, you know, to make great anguished songs, kind of thing. I don't think that's I think they're just living their lives in a fairly that kind of late 60s hippie kind of it's fairly chaotic. They're young musicians, they're out on the road,
George Harrison said it
meeting lots of
himself.
people. Yeah.
He said everybody was
what?
in love.
George Harrison,
Everybody was sleeping with everyone.
George Harrison, the great trumpeter himself.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. Yeah, the quiet one. Yeah, right. Yeah, well, we'll see.
It was a different era then. I don't think.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it was intentional. I don't think he set out to do these things to
no,
to set himself up for that. That's what he's getting now. I think it was just guy fell for a girl. I mean, he just. I mean, when you know his life history, he wasn't setting himself up for these things. It's just his personality was like that. He even says it like he was different, even as from a child to everyone else. He was different. He felt that he was different. He knew that.
Mm.
Well, it kind of blows me away because in that 12-bar movie that you're talking about, Brad, it's quite interesting because he said that when he was young, he used to eat sugar. He used to pour sugar. He was addicted to sugar because it used to alter his mind, his way of thinking, the way he felt. So even back when he was like young, he had this compulsive, addictive personality, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorts of things. So as we know, the alcohol years were not, not very good for him. So the heroin, lost on heroin.
Another interesting thing about his early life when he's in his teens is that he had a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and he would tape himself playing along to blues records and then listen to it back and to see whether he got it right, see how close he was getting. So even at that age, he's being the musicologist, digging into it deeply. Am I playing, not approximating and kind of, but actually saying, can I really play it like this? Is it really, can I really do it, kind of thing?
And having the courage, Simon, to get other people to say, does this sound like the record too? Because, you and I are going to hear something, but someone else is going to, so he had to go and ask his friends, does this sound like that? And I'd say, Simon, it sounds bloody fantastic.
That's what they say all the time.
I think his addictive personality led him to do the Crossroads rehabilitation centre that he did for people with addictions.
Yeah.
And that was his way of giving back, I think, because he's obviously had a fruitful life through music. So he felt like he had to give back. So,
sold all his guitars to pay for it and stuff like that, Sold all his famous guitars, pretty much, didn't he, to pay for it.
Part of him dealing with letting go of certain things too, I reckon. There was more to it than just raising money. But, he's a pretty deep guy. I mean, there's so much we've read and know about him, and there's a lot we probably don't know about him.
Although I do think that he is honest in a way that most rock stars are not, isn't he? I mean, he is happy to discuss his addictive personality, his addictions, he is happy to put quite a lot of it out there, which I agree with you, but I think he sees it as part of his kind of his ongoing therapy of managing himself. But he doesn't hold back, does he, Andrew? I mean, there's a lot of stuff of him going into detail about the madness and the crazy times and being
open about it,
being self-critical and open about it. Absolutely, yeah. Which I think puts him at odds with a lot of other artists, actually. Who kind of who don't do that very much. Don't put themselves out there like that as and are not nearly so transparent about it. I think that's very, we know a lot because he puts a lot out, about his psychological thought, where he is.
That's true.
Yeah.
and things.
Yeah, I think it's all part of that authenticity, that he's been after for a long time, and I think blues music does that to you too. You try to, we all know the mythology of the music, and I think that's what attracts blues music attracts a different kind of music fan in my experience. It's someone that probably understands things maybe on a metaphysical level too, that understands and makes those connections with what's happening around them. One of the great things that we like about these British guys is that they understood instinctively what was happening when they were listening to these black guys in their own lives in post-war Britain, the bleakness, the horrible lives that they were leading, and the blandness and the black, so, and this music gave them vibrancy, gave them optimism. So are we surprised that Eric Clapton is, full of these ups and downs and these troughs and these, low peaks and high peaks?
I mean, it's interesting that his father was a Canadian soldier, wasn't he? Yeah, he was a soldier.
I thought he was a New Zealander.
No, Edward Walter Fryer.
Yeah,
25-year-old soldier from Montreal, Quebec. He winded me up.
Yeah. Yeah. Canadians, New Zealanders, we're all the same.
Nope.
Okay.
We haven't got Canadians in the chat, but I was going to say that kind of experience of post-war, people getting together with short periods and going back, and children resulting from those liaisons and stuff like that. My own family has exactly that. My grandfather came back from the war to find his family, my grandmother and my mum, kind of nuclear unit, and kind of went off and had an affair with somebody else, from a woman called Penelope Mortimer, a daughter resulted from it. So my mum has sadly she died a couple of years ago, but a year ago. But so they had a half sister, which is a result of that wartime experience and what that wartime experience did to families, and he's very much for me in the same thing where he's brought up by his grandparents, mistakenly thinking of his parents and all that kind of thing. So there's a kind of there's a sort of jumbling of the generations and roles and your relationship with all those things.
He had that sort of turbulent sort of time frame from an early age, and I think that just carried through. And even losing his son Connor, that we know is tragic, and there's so many things that were pivotal points for him. I think
what would you do, Brad, if you went away on holiday? And Simon, if you went away on holiday and the most important thing in your life was your acoustic guitar, and it's sitting down and some fucking arsehole sits on your guitar and snaps your guitar, what would you... And actually it was your brother, your half-brother that did that. Sorry for swearing. For swearing, but I'm just thinking about sorry, but I'm just trying to. What would you do if somebody did that? You just jeepers on purpose.
You'd be angry. You would be angry.
Especially, I'm going to snap your head off.
Yeah, it's the old Sean Connery thing. You snap my guitar, I snap your head. One of them pulls a knife, you pull a gun. One of them puts yours in the hospital, you put one of theirs in the morgue. Is it that kind of thing?
The fact that Clapton mentions that a few times recently in his recent biography, and I think that indicates to me, guys, something. I think that act in itself must have had something deeper.
That's true. If you attach so much importance to that, and it's a part of your life, and obviously it was for him. Kubrick love is turning wild.
I mean,
Keep an eye on him, mods.
something more to it than just the physical act of that too. It would have been because the guitar was his safe place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we all know that,
yeah.
don't we? I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Brad. It's that, your record player and your guitar.
Yep.
We all know that, don't we, Simon?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, he didn't want to. That was an awful experience for him because his mum was quite nasty, and the way that they, obviously the first time he met her, he's like, he said to his half brother, "Is this my brother?" And she's like, "No, that's not your brother." So there was this thing of not accepting or acknowledging him as her own. So that would have been a painful experience.
Yeah.
Where did they go? Germany or something? I think they went on.
Yeah.
He went on holiday to
Yeah.
Anyway, that whole thing would have been a breaking point, so to speak, for him. I think. He was young.
Yeah.
Still young. He wasn't. So.
Well, I think after that he looked at that and he said that he wasn't going to trust anybody ever again. I think that was the quote after, or let anybody else into his life again, something like that.
He pretty much did that for the majority of his life. Locked everyone out a little bit, isolated himself a little bit, even in the early 70s. And he just had that about him. He wouldn't let people in.
Yeah, well, this is one of the interesting things about Clapton too, and I think Whitlock talks about it and other people. He'd make fast friends. He would be, all of a sudden he'd meet you and you're his best friend, and you're hanging out and you're doing everything, and then, he'd ditch you, he'd move on to somebody else, and, I've been like, I've never been the fast friender. I've always been the one that's been ditched. So, I think that sort of goes back to that search for authenticity. He's not there using people. I think he's there to try and get whatever he can. And can I say this? Because I don't know the guy. Can we say in a positive way, or maybe there's some narcissistic elements to it? I don't know. We're not psychologists. But I'd like to think that, it's this journey that he's going down, that he's looking for authenticity. That's why he got Bobby Whitlock over. And they just jammed for hours and days and days and days. All they would live on is fry-ups and mandrakes, and then they got the rest of the guys over, Carl and Jim Gordon over, and then all of a sudden, they've got this band. And before that, Bobby says, "Oh, I've got no money, I'm going home." And Eric says, "But I thought we were going to form a band." But, they had no discussion over that. But Eric, somehow in his mind, had made that communication to Bobby, we're forming this band, but didn't really tell him.
Yeah. Forgot some of the
forgot to tell him.
Forgot to tell him. A, to tell him. B, to say, by the way, there's some money in it for you and stuff.
Yeah.
So you can eat. Not
Simon, how you like to do comparisons between back then and today?
Yeah.
So Bobby got paid. He got a weekly draw. So they went to London to get some money too, because apparently Eric said, "I need some money as well." So they went to go and see Stiggy, and so he gave them £150, which equals to $2,300 a week. So, and Bobby says, "I've never seen so much money in my life. This guy from Memphis, this poor guy, because he was a cotton picker. Let's not forget that."
Yeah. Yes, I know. You talked about in his latest video, and then he wasn't good enough to be a cotton picker, so he had to go back to be a water carrier. Get back to the water carrying.
What a boy!
Whitlock, get back to the water carrying. You're rubbish at it.
So again, guys, we've got this other aspect of white poor guys as well in America. With the blues. It's just What a
I
That's
place.
funny.
think they were
Yeah.
even in a position where Clapton, even when he was at his unhealthiest on alcohol abuse, he had to tour because
Yeah.
he wanted to retire. I think even at one point he wanted to, he had to keep touring because he could have given it up. He said, I mean, I'm sure we've all read and seen the documentation of him saying those sort of things, where he was at one point he didn't even really want to live. Really, he just, you know. But,
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I
but
do. Yeah.
he so there might have been a lot of money involved, and it's the same today, I guess. There's always money in records, but the artist is to be the one that never really gets it. So, but I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, him coming full, to this day, he's very grateful and giving now because he's giving back because he's made so much from music. But he's obviously got to a point where, his life's different now. He's probably found a lot of peace from the things I've read and seen of him in his current situation in life. He's a lot happier.
Yeah. Obviously, he's got family and he's got 75. It's difficult to be. It's difficult. Hopefully, you're not quite so tortured at 75 as you were when you were 25. But
very adamant about the fact that he's finally found happiness. So,
yeah. Contentment, play, sort of like that. Yeah. Can I just say, talking of comparisons, Andrew, I like to go. So 50 years ago, Derek and the Dominoes Layla was 1970. Go back 50 years before that, you get to 1920. What was happening in anything in 1920? Music in 1920. It's amazing, isn't it?
Sam Cutler said the only thing that you've got going on back then is the jazz scene in Berlin.
There you are.
That's it.
That's about it. Yeah. See, I mean, jazz hadn't really come over here yet. It was just a New Orleans thing, wasn't it? Kind of, 20s. It's so yeah. Just think about that, kids. It's amazing, isn't it, that you do that sort of thing when you go back and how different the world was 50 years before. We think about us going back 50 years to something. It's amazing.
So what was your impression, Brad and Simon, when you guys were beginning to learn guitar and learn music? Were there any songs on this album that inspired you at an early age that you wanted to play, or some kind of tone that you wanted to replicate? Were there any songs in particular?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, go on, Brad.
Yep.
Go on.
Yep.
Well, for me, it's always been that lifelong quest to write a riff that's memorable, like Layla, and that riff in itself. I mean, I recently picked up the guitar and started playing it again without even reading, because from a young age I was playing guitar and I was learning that song, the chord progressions, the like, it's so catchy. It's got I've always, that in itself was a massive part for me as a guitarist to learn, to even for songwriting, because I write a lot of riffs. Like, riffs are how I write songs. So if you look at the standards, like the songs that are always catchy, like a riff like Layla, the whole song, it starts off with almost like an alternative to the riff, and then the riff kicks in, and that riff, and that is the signature. I've always wanted to try and capture that as a songwriter myself, and I mean, I'm still searching, but what I'm getting at is the quest as a guitar player to learn those licks, to learn that a riff that's infectious. It's stapled in the back of my head forever, that song,
Yeah.
It became a big part of me trying to learn to do those pentatonic licks that he does in throughout this album and throughout his career. But that intro, once the song kicks in, just before he starts singing the first verse, I used to sit for hours playing that. Could hardly play it, couldn't play it properly, but I used to sit for hours trying to get the inflections right, the bends right. So it's been a massive part of my that riff. So that in itself, I'll hand it over to Simon. But yeah, that song, I could go on hours, but Layla off this album is a big part of me playing guitar.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah. I have to say, not for me. Interesting. I mean, because because I started listening to music in '72, so probably what first made me want to play the guitar is Dylan and the Beatles. Wanting to play Dylan, principally Dylan, really. But so go back to kind of simpler thing, really. So I've always been interested in learning the song as much as I have been about learning the riff. Actually, the song, the storytelling bit is as important to me as the riff, really. In fact, probably more in my case. So nothing particularly on this album I would say influenced me as a guitar player at all. Obviously that riff, and I've attempted it on and off throughout the years later on, but not in the beginning. No, I was very much a kind of singer-songwriter, Neil Young, Bob Dylan, that kind of very much learning that song, because as we've discussed on here, they were pretty simple songs to learn. It was chords, kind of major chords, a lot of it, and stuff. So it was it was easy, and also that thing about I only had an acoustic guitar for the first bit. I didn't get an electric guitar till late '70s, so a lot of years just playing acoustic. And if you play acoustic, people want to hear you do songs. So actually what you do is you learn songs, and on an acoustic guitar, if he'd done unplugged version of Layla, I would have been all about it, because that would be fine. So no, not so much for me, but that's just where I am in the space-time continuum of when music came, because it was still new when I started. But I didn't have the equipment to nor really the wherewithal to want to replicate that yet. That was later kind of thing, really.
Yeah, the song for me that was a standout when I listened to the album when I was probably 13 or 14. The only thing that I can remember vividly standing out, guys, was Little Wing. That riff to Little Wing, and I hadn't heard Hendrix's version back then, so I'm hearing this, this phenomenal, thing going on, and then I didn't hear the album for a long time, but knew Layla, obviously, because that's played on FM radio. You're gonna have a Pink Floyd song, you're gonna have a Led Zeppelin song, and it's gonna be Layla. Pretty much.
Wait a minute. A Led Zeppelin song and it's going to be Layla. Wait a minute. That's like wait a minute. You're rewriting.
Yeah, but it could be one of 20 Led Zeppelin songs.
None of them are called Layla though.
No, and then Layla. But it wasn't until like I said at the top of the show, guys, till about the mid 2000s when I seriously studied the album and just fell in love with it. I think the thing for me about this album, and it's always been in my vehicle, I play this album regularly. It's but for me, I love what the album represents. I love the fact, Simon, that it's inspired by the Big Pink thing and the singer-songwriter aspect. I love the fact that it's a jam and that, two of the hottest guitar players in the world from two different continents are represented on that album, And Brad said it in his introduction earlier, Clapton sitting there behind the security, and Dwayne Allman stops playing. You know, it wasn't because a girl was standing there saying, "Here I am, baby," or anything like that. You know, it was Eric Clapton. You know, and guys, I'm going to ask you another question. So, and then you had Jimi Hendrix a couple of years earlier doing the same thing, going to the UK saying, you know, I'll go, but can I hang out with Eric Clapton?
Yeah.
No.
Recognizing him another great musician. Yeah.
We all know the friendship they had together too. So Clapton were pretty close.
And that's the reason he did Little Wing, wasn't it? Because he wanted to pay tribute to the living Clapton, living Hendrix, not the dead Hendrix. But yeah, as it so happened, it was sadly became a bit of a tribute to him when he died. But that was the idea, wasn't it? That's why they wanted to do it, so that they could, so that he could pay tribute to his friend, which is pretty cool, And he's,
And Bobby Whitlock, God bless him, he's given us a lot of these insights too. So he tells us exactly how that song was crafted. It was Dwayne Allman who got the chords, that intro. That's all Dwayne Allman. That's Dwayne Allman, man. And I'm going, so just
cool.
What a time! What a time! What a time! What a band!
But you're right. It was what a time. You'd had the late '60s and the blooming, and when you were about to have the annus mirabilis of 1971, and everyone knows it's in all the rule books that 1971 is the greatest year for rock albums ever. Apparently, but I think that it's sort of where albums became really. I think that was the first time they sold singles. Maybe not. But that's so many really big, like Led Zeppelin 4 and stuff, are all 1971, and it's such a massive year, and it plays into that that zeitgeist really of where musicians had been heading for the last 3 or 4 years, spearheaded by Clapton. Let's be fair, spearheading all that, the longer songs, the jamming, the bigger groups playing, bigger places. This is all cream, and all this is all Clapton absolutely in the vanguard of this development of music, lots of improvisation, extended songs, all that is he's right in there, Clapton, leading it. From the front, and that thing about people starting to believe that they were artists, they had something to say of import, and could go and spend time being creative, and it was and it was all right to do that. It was cool to be to be a creative musician, and maybe, just maybe, there was a bit more than a couple of years in it, a bit more than a couple of years in a couple of hairdressing salons, as Ringo Starr famously said to me when asked how he thought the future of the Beatles. If I get another year out of it, I'll get a couple of hairdressing salons, I'll be happy. It's a lovely idea. It's absolutely, Rick. It's whatever your entry point is, isn't it, into somebody's career? Then you can go back and forth.
Yeah, I think one of the key things for me though is that that album. It's always going to be an intercessor, an interlinker. Of other things. Of that time, Simon. That that's important. The album, as you said, was saying something, the artists still mattered, didn't they? It was about being creative, and Bobby Whitlock himself tells us it wasn't about the money. They didn't know. No. They didn't know what they were going to get, from, it was just about this flow on. But one thing, I know that we probably aren't going to make a start on it, because we're going to go through and rate the songs, but there's one thing though that I'll always forever grateful for on YouTube, and that's the Johnny Cash show where you've got Eric Clapton there, Carl and Jim, and you've got Bobby and us singing, you know, It's Too Late. And you look at that guitar solo. Now, Eric Clapton is just plugged straight into a Fender Twin. Bobby's playing the piano. They're doing their Sam and Dave, you know, sing along. And that fluid. And the camera, God bless that cameraman. That cameraman gets it right. He's actually focusing on some guitar playing. So we see Clapton actually playing some licks. And he doesn't miss a beat. In fact, I think that version of It's Too Late's better than the record version. That's my opinion. But it's just a great record of how these guys can just turn up, plug in, and they've got a couple of mics set there at the Ryman Auditorium, and there's no pedal board, and they play. And Carl Rattle has to stand there behind Jim Gordon because he can't hear Jim, so he's got to watch Jim's foot to make sure that they get
to play in time.
They're playing in time. So can you imagine, Brad, a bass player, you rocking up to a concert or a gig tomorrow, and the bass player, you're going to say, go and stand over there next to the drummer and look at his foot, and that's going to tell you where you're going to be for your beat buddy. Is that going to happen?
Never mind your in-ears, never mind your in-ear monitoring and all of that. Yeah.
I could upset a lot of bass players right now. That's where they need to stand. No, I'm joking.
Look at those thumbs downs piling on.
There goes. Yeah, there goes the show ratings.
There goes all your bass players. Sorry about that. I'm joking. I'm honestly joking about bass players. Hey, I play bass on my records, you know. It's like that's anyway. What I'm getting at is, that would be mind-numbingly crazy to think your bass player has to stand behind the drum kit to actually see, or because they can't hear it, so they're watching. That would be like a total spin out for a bass player to have to play off visual rather than hearing it. That would be really good. They'd have to be a remarkable musician to do that. So credit where credit's due. I know I made fun of bass players, but bass players are the integral part. And if they're not playing by sound, they can still do it visually, which is quite amazing.
Yeah. But that's typical of the late 60s, early 70s, isn't it? Monitoring and all those things. At some point it's like you just got to go and stand behind the drummer and watch his foot because that's how it works.
Well, the era. I mean, through the early 60s to the late 60s, no one could really hear what was going on when they were on stage. No. A lot of the amplification they had on stage was what was the crowd were hearing, not necessarily mic'd up.
Okay.
Could I say, massive kudos to the Johnny Cash show, which got, it got everybody on. Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan, as we said, Derek and the Dominoes, Neil Young, Gordon Lightfoot, all these people appeared on the Johnny Cash TV show, and he sang with them, stuff like that. It's amazing.
Well, they didn't
kudos to that.
They didn't want rock and rollers, and the only reason why they got Eric Clapton on is because that album, the cover of "It's Too Late," was a country song. So that's kind of what got them going. And apparently there was a queue of young rock and rollers, long haired, denim trousers, wearing people wanting to buy tickets to go there and see Eric Clapton. But I agree with you, Simon. Johnny Cash was at his height in popularity, and just a wonderful venue for musicians to go and play. And can I say this, Simon and Brad and everyone in the chat? It was live. There was no miming, no lip syncing, no dancers running in front of you to distract distract you because you weren't singing properly and you were going to miss the mic?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and all of that, and yeah. One off you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're in.
Yeah.
Off you go. Yeah. So, anybody who's not heard it, sorry, sidetracking, but if you've not heard Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan doing One Too Many Mornings,
Beautiful.
Well worth a listen.
It's beautiful.
Have you, Andrew?
I love Nashville Skyline. I love that.
Oh.
Yeah. So you get look. Stop talking about Bob Dylan. That's another show.
Sorry. Yes. Get back on, Williams. Get back on track. Sorry, sir. Sorry.
Okay. So we're going to have a Bob Dylan for beginners, Bob Dylan for blues beginners show. Simon's going to host it, and we're going to schedule that for December. Okay. So get the word out there to all your friends who don't know anything about Bob Dylan. We're going to have a Bob Dylan special.
Simon's doing intro to his Bobness.
But yeah, I just I take my hat off to these guys, how they just, and Carl Perkins, I think that's another clip too. Carl Perkins is there and they're doing Matchbox, and Carl Perkins is just tearing it up, isn't he? Yeah.
Well, and you're absolutely right. That I think they had Creedence on. They had Roy Orbison. Look at this. They had Roy Orbison and Creedence, Clearwater Revival, on one show. That's
wow.
Classic. Glenn Campbell, Marty Robbins on another one. Dusty Springfield. I mean, Ray Charles, Neil Diamond, and Tammy Wynette on one show.
Wow.
That's putting it out there, isn't it? As a kind of, not I'm the headliner, I'm the show. No, you're going with all these other people. Look at that. Ray Charles, Lisa Minnelli, and Arlo Guthrie. Look at that.
Wow.
Amazing kind of lineups of people. Stevie Wonder appeared on it as well. And
these are superstars. They're superstars.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're not just ring-ins.
No,
Ray Charles.
No. Yeah, Ray Charles. Was he any good? No. I'm joking. Anybody's a Ray Charles fan, I'm joking. It's one of the greats. But yeah, you're absolutely, I think you're right. That thing about you're going to come on my show and we're going to play, and it's going to be live, and you might not be able to hear yourself, and you have to go and stand behind the drummer. And yeah, absolutely. Fantastic.
And just to make things even more interesting, there's a red light button that will go on and it's going on TV.
Yeah. 250 million people. Pay attention.
Up on the drummer going, watching a foot,
Yeah. That's you know what? That takes your mind off it, doesn't it? It takes your mind off it. It's like,
or it amplifies how important it is that you get it right.
And Sonia's right too, and no auto-tune.
Yes, Sonia, that's really good point.
Yeah.
No auto-tune and no damn click tracks either. Said the Luddite at the back. Yeah, no damn click tracks either.
Yeah.
Oh dear. What, allowing drummers to speed up and slow down? Whoever would have thought of such a thing?
Yeah, I just take my hat
phenomenal.
off to.
Yeah. You don't think about how phenomenal that is, and how how difficult, and how they just all did it, didn't they? Just went on shows and just played live and just gone on with it. It's fantastic. Yeah, really fantastic.
Well, here's another thing then too. So Bobby Whitlock, and we have to take him at his word because he's clearing up a few things. So they had a couple of lines of coke before they went on too. So they weren't, they weren't straight. They were in zippity doo dah land too. So that makes it even more what's amazing, I suppose, because they were all in time.
Yeah. It's a lot of that stuff is amazing for but my view of this. It gives it a feel, it gives it a vibe, it gives that kind of a natural rhythm that's in tune with our rhythms, really, of kind of when you play, which I find it much more attractive than modern music, which doesn't seem to quite have that for me.
So what do you guys want to do now? Do we want to? Because I'm looking at the time. We've only been going on for an hour and a half. Do we want to go and do we want to do some song ratings, or do we want to talk about the end of Derek and the Dominoes? It is, you know, because that in itself is another reason why, you know, the album is important, because, you know, there's tragedies for other members of that band, isn't there, you know, in itself, and then how the band split up. Is that something that we want to talk about now, or I'll let you guys make that decision?
How much longer do you want to go, Andrew? How much? I mean, I'm all right. It's 6:42 here. I can do another 3 hours.
How much time have you got, Brad?
I'm fine. You just let me know what you want to do. I mean, we can talk about gear and things like that, or like guitar gear, I guess. And,
I think what. Hey Nelson, thanks for joining us. Hey Alex, thanks for joining us.
Alex. Hey guys.
I think what we should do then, before we get into, you know, talking about the songs, and I suppose is, you know, the end of the band, because you know, they were clearly after, you know, a successful tour. You know, the record was doing marginally okay, Simon and Brad, and they were in 71 April. They were getting ready to, you know, do another album, and Clapton and Jim Gordon had a problem, didn't they? You know, there was a big problem.
Yeah, that's right, in the studio, didn't they? They had a fight, and Jim Gordon pushed Clapton too far.
Yeah, but it was leading up to that. You know, Bobby Whitlock, but you know, talks about, you know, how Jim Gordon wanted to take over the band, didn't he?
Yeah, he wanted to take over the band. I also think, you know, that it seems clear that, you know, one of the things that I think it's Whitlock says that, you know, after the recording Layla, we were on the road and we stored an enormous amount of drugs to take with us. And this was the beginning of the end. So I think that what we've discussed before, which is, you know, that the actual making of Layla, and prior to that, not nearly so much in the way of drugs, but post making it, then going on tour, then the drugs start to kick in, and then you've got the paranoia, and you've got the, you know, adversarial stuff, and, you know, and that really contributes, you know, sadly, to the breakup. Because I think, you know, that you know, apparently they were absolutely phenomenal. I just part of the thing I got was that Elton John, no less a man than Mr. Elton John, said that they were phenomenal. You know, the band were absolutely, from the side of the stage, you know, they were phenomenal. And he said he watched Bobby Whitlock like a hawk about what he was playing and what he was doing. And you know,
I'm glad you brought up Elton John. So have you guys heard what Elton John was doing on that tour? It's mentioned in Bobby Whitlock's book. So Elton John was an absolute ratbag. He was trashing. So what happened was, because he was the support act, so he'd get to the hotel before Eric and the rest of the band, and the hotel didn't want Eric and Bobby Whitlock, because bloody Elton John had thrown TVs out windows and, you know, smashed up hotel rooms. So he you know, there was some weird stuff going on there.
Yeah, well, you know, he's as complex as everyone else, isn't he, Mr. Elton John? Was he doing read connection? There we are. Was he doing Tumbleweed Connection then?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, Mark
so he,
there we are.
Yeah. So he was the opening act, but you know, it's interesting that you should
talk
about
his Americana album.
Yeah. So he was going to yeah. Someone told him that the rock and roll thing was, you know, yeah.
See, you know, this is a man who's never been to America, right? Only heard of it, never been to America, and makes an album with a cover like that. That looks like a sort of looks like a looks like a blues album, doesn't it? You know, that sort of picture is amazingly funny. It's sort of, you know, yeah.
You're right,
yeah.
Alex.
Elton makes
Elton. Elton
really
tears
did.
up. But it's interesting that you should talk about the drug use, because again, the booklet for this 20th anniversary kit that came out in 1990 again talks about how there was the guy who wrote the booklet quotes Tom Dowd saying there were bags of blow in the studio, and you know they were drinking whiskey in the studio. This is the guy that wrote the booklet for this, and we know that's bullshit because there was no drugs in the studio. Tom Dowd wouldn't allow it. If there were any participation in illicit or recreational drugs, it was after. It was never in the studio.
No, that's right. Yeah, and you know, as we've discussed before, you know, you just wouldn't be able to function and make an album in 2 weeks if you were out of it all the time, would you? You know, that, you know, dope smoking, lack of focus kind of thing, and lack of organisation would have cut in and. Amazing, really. Do you know that?
Brad, you were going to say something, Brad.
Sorry, Brad, go on.
I was going to say, I don't think the recreational side of it would have been during the creative side. Would have been outside of the studio anyway. Is it? If it was, you know, if they were experiencing too much, should I say, substance abuse during the recording sessions, you'd be able to tell. They were on top of it. They were on fire. They never missed a beat. I'd say it would have been after the sessions that they would have been indulging.
Yeah, and I think it's probably true, isn't it, Brad? That if they, you know, Clapton and, you know, Allman get together, they go back to the studio, you know, after a gig like midnight or something, you know, then I can see you sitting around and having a glass of, you know, a few glasses of whiskey and maybe a joint and stuff like that, you know, whilst you're playing and things. I completely get that, because it kind of loosens people up and gets people, you know, so that you can, you know, get some kind of musical relationship going on, kind of, you know, strips away some of the stuff. So I think that, you know, I think absolutely that probably is the case, and what in that book is probably concatenating the two things together, and not actually say, they're turning up, having breakfast and getting on with some work, because, as I say, you know, record an album, you record Layla in 2 weeks, that isn't messing about, is it? That's not, you know, you're laying around on the piano, stoned out of your head. You know, it's not working. It's just, you know, the work, the number of songs and the stuff just doesn't bear that out as a scenario to me. You know, they
were there 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They were there, you know, ready to go, cleaned, showered, you know, whatever Tom Dowd said it himself. If they did anything the previous night, Simon and Brad, you know, it had no reflection on how they were participating in the studio. In fact, he said, you know, the spontaneity that they had, and this is why, you know, Have You Ever Loved a Woman and Key to the Highway are so amazing from a historical point of view, is that you've got Tom Dowd saying that these guys were speaking to each other in a different language. These guys were looking at each other, and the notes that they were doing weren't notes that you would normally hear. It was in the fingertips. It was, you know, magic. So again, this is something I think that just reflects that depth of the album. But you know, the drugs became an issue, Simon and Brad, after Layla, and you know, and clearly Jim Gordon, you know, had problems, didn't he? He had personality problems. Yeah.
Clearly a nutter. Yes. Yeah. That's completely.
You know, telling Eric how to play. When does a drummer, Brad, when does a drummer ever tell a lead guitarist how to play? Tell me.
I'll tell you a quick funny story. I was in a recording session, and my drummer in the band at the time goes to me, "You've got red light syndrome. Every time the red light goes on, you fuck up. Sorry to swear." Right? And I turned around and said, "Shut the fuck up and just hit things for a living." So we got, you know, they tell me what to play, you just hit things. I play guitar. It's quite heated in the moment, but that in saying that, if a drummer was to ever try and tell me what to play on guitar, I'd be like, you just concentrate on hitting things, all right?
I'd be put the easy bit of hitting things. That's what you've got to say.
You always put a drummer in place by telling them that they just hit things for a living. You know, that's it.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think, you know, that as we've discussed it before, I think there's, you know, a lot of drugs and a lot of. I was just having a look at those, Alex. Actually, I was having, because I've got the booklet here and stuff. It's not.
So there's one that's staged where Carl Rattle and Bobby Whitlock talks about that, how he's sitting there with a wine bottle, and that's staged, you know. And
where are we? Somewhere down there.
There it is there.
Yeah.
But
most of that,
look,
they seem fairly upright and on it, don't they? Could I say my favourite picture of Clapton is that one there. He's a pipe and a motorcycle helmet and no shirt.
You've also got to remember these guys.
But no one's saying they weren't taking any drugs, though, eh?
No, during that. They were indulging, but it wouldn't have been studio time because Tom Dowd wouldn't have allowed it.
That's correct.
And secondly, the creative output that they did in a short period of time and the genius behind it, I'll be honest with you, I couldn't imagine an artist that's like, I mean, Hendrix was the same. He was indulged, he took things, this and that, but when it came to recording, that was what was most important to him. That was his natural high when he was in the studio. So I'm not and probably sessions that were very fueled by chemicals or alcohol or whatever. But this session, for example, with these guys, I would say that's indulged, but not during the recording.
No, completely. Yeah.
Because you can't. I mean, if someone's addicted to something, for example, they're not going to stop during the recording of an album, but they're not going to take it at a recording session because artists have done that. No, on bands and all that stuff.
If you want to know what the effect of all that, like, just read an account of the Doors. Like Jim Morrison, you know, obviously, you know, turns up at the studio completely wobble-eyed and kind of, you know, and very, you know, impossible to get a performance out of him or anything, you know, for days.
Or Brian Jones on the Beggars Banquet in the studio there.
Well, they you know, Jim Morrison, they literally, like, by the time they got to the sock parade, they would try and get the best out of him straight up because they knew by the end of the recording session for that day they'd get nothing out of him. And we're sort of straying a little bit, but yeah, definitely they would have been at their best during that. They would have been they wouldn't have been indulging during that session for this recording session.
No, that's right. Alex, completely agree. I think, you know, that like a lot of records, it's got 50 years, it's got an anniversary, so hopefully people will pick up on it and stuff. And you know.
Yeah.
It's
and if you want to share our video, Alex, with your friends on social media, you know, if we get a couple of people that think anything that Brad and I and Simon have said is interesting, well, we've done our job, including yourself, Alex. So got to put a plug in there for the channel. So don't forget to share us. We'd appreciate that.
Yeah. I think that Alex, just to cheer you up a bit, that I have teenage daughters. My 16-year-old daughter. It's just, you can see, you know, they start off very narrow in their sort of pop music world, and it's just what's really current. In the last 6 months, my middle daughter, her musical taste has started to spread out, and she started listening to a lot of late 70s punk and kind of new wave stuff, and you're going, where's that coming from? You know, and she just, you know, and it's kind of discovery thing, you know, and all of a sudden she plays stuff in the car kind of thing when we're driving along, gets the Orgs lead and plugs it in. But, you know, and there are things that I go, make you hear that, kind of thing. So she's playing, Ian Dury in the Blockheads, Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll, and then she play the Buzzcocks, Falling in Love with Somebody Should Have Fallen, So I think that in a way, these things, if people are out there looking around, then these things do appear in people's consciousness and in people's playlists and stuff. And, so I think there's a sort of, there's still that kind of trickle effect of going into it. If that that cheers you up a bit, Alex. Yeah. Well, see, he's 18. You see, you're 18, and you know lots of music, a bit like that. You see, gone back to it, found out what it is. The only advantage that Andrew and I have, probably Andrew and I, Brad, is that I'm kind of nearer the front of the timeline, so I see the timeline of it all in front of me, and I got some idea about how it works, but you might have less of an idea, but not for long though, by the sound of it. But I think that's probably the only thing. So you're investigating it. As I said, my 16-year-old daughter is investigating it. Things are coming to her, out of the blue. And, her friends' parents are in, playing. My daughter's she's really into. She started buying vinyl records. My 16-year-old. She's kind of bought some vinyl records, which is really cool. So I'm going to buy a record player for Christmas and stuff because, that's
Julie.
what she really likes. She really likes
Julia.
playing records. Julia Baldessaro, how you doing? Hope you're good. Thank you very much for joining.
So we're just talking about the 50th anniversary, our little contribution, Julia, of the Layla and other Assorted Love Songs. So it's next week, if you want to tune in, Julia, we're going to go through and do the rankings and skip or play. That's one thing that my co-hosts and I do. So we like to talk a little bit about the record, bit of the background. And this show in particular, we've spent close to 2 hours talking about it. But next week will be the skip and play, and probably a little bit more. But so we're getting back to the end of the end of Derek and the Dominoes. Clapton, I think, guys, like a lot of things in his life, just saw the Derek and the Dominoes thing as one part, and he was ready to move on. So he was going to use anything, I think, to get out and move ahead, because we've just discussed earlier that he was always looking for, something else, wasn't he? And I think the Derek thing had done its job.
I think that's probably true. Yeah. Yes, things run their course, don't they?
It was written out for finding an out when things were, when he was ready to out, he outed. He did that with the Yardbirds. He did that with, John Mayall. He did that with Cream, in a sense.
Yep.
Cream.
Yep.
Yeah. And you can see that Allman dying in a motorcycle accident, and then he went into sort of he just went off for a couple of years, didn't he? After it, didn't he? It was then he went off and did his kind of 2-year kind of heroin addiction behind closed doors thing. It was after that, wasn't it, that he kind of withdrew.
Yep.
So obviously, my view is that he probably, that I think he would have, if it had worked and they'd been able, Jim Gordon wasn't quite such a lunatic, I'm sure there were other issues, and drugs are a, terrible kind of, paranoia inducing, in bands, which is, as we've discussed on here, Brad, I don't know if my theory about being in band is that it gives you a license to be an idiot like no other thing I can think of in my, in things that people I've been in bands with do. You just, in works, you just, just wouldn't do it. It would be impossible to get away with it. And yet, people do stuff, in a band situation. They would never, they unleash parts of their personality that nobody should be unleashing.
I'm sure it's on our own about that.
Yeah. I kind of think, though, because he was tight with Bobby, I think if Jim Gordon hadn't have been as toxic and as confrontational, I kind of think maybe they may have done another album because you know. Yeah, that's my theory. I think, you know, and we all know that Eric didn't want to be around toxic drummers. You know, he'd been in Cream.
What are you saying? He's got a bit of a history with toxic drummers.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why Blind Faith, you know, because he's, you know, he talks about getting that feeling in his stomach again when Ginger had that mood on. You know, he just didn't want to be around that overt confrontation, and I think we all as human beings know what kind of that's like, you know.
Yeah.
Oh God, yes, and you know, and you know, it's really wearing that, isn't it? You know, that if you're, you know, constant confrontation with, you know, some, you know, in those sort of senses, that you just, you know, you go, well, I'm the guitar player. I can write songs. I can sing. I can do it. I'll go and find somebody else to do it with. You know, somebody who's not going to give me a load of grief. You know, and we know, you know, that what, you know, when you ask anybody, any musician that you see on, you know, on YouTube that is asked about what's the number one thing, you know, and the number one thing about me being a musician, if anything, is you've got to be a good hang. You know, go and ask Pete Thorne. You know, number one thing. Got to be a good hang. You've got to turn up, be ready, straight, organised. Yeah, but above all, you've got to be fun, you know, and not unleash the darker reaches of your personality. Thanks ever so, you know, and you know, go with it. But so I think, you know, that can we say without fear of retribution that Ginger Baker probably not a good hang. Nor Jim Gordon, frankly. But,
well, I think Jim was, you know, for a while there, you know, and no one knew that he was a schizophrenic. You know, I think, you know, certainly, and if you know, we've all read biographies, and we may even know people where drugs have induced schizophrenia in some people. You know, I've got a friend, you know. Yeah, and that's what kind of happened. So, you know, we kind of probably understand that. So at some point he was a pretty good guy to hang out with. But then, you know, can I ask guys, you know, the same thing, maybe a little bit of success, you know, got there too, you know, how many times have we seen that in rock and roll bands, you know? Yeah, maybe this drummer didn't want to be one that wakes up in the morning and sees the lead singer driving in a Merc and a Mercedes and having, you know, Porsches while he's got a V-dub van.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we've discussed this before, that bands are like a marriage. So, you know, the longer you're with someone, the harder you got to work to, you know, people change. Whether it's short term or long term, over a period of time, people evolve, whether they don't evolve and stay where they are, and now the people around them keep evolving. So there's this area of grey where people don't connect anymore, and then those personalities start to become things that rub against the grain on you, because you go, well, that, you know, the little things become big things too. So you've got these people to be creative, and if something's clouding any judgment or any creative flow, then they're going to look at sort of going, well, I can't work with this person anymore, and things like that. And a lot of people do that, is they end up doing things on their own because for one reason or another, it's just a matter of, well, on my own I get it done when I'm with this person, or I need to find a replacement for this person because they're causing us time and energy that we can't be creative, like where we need to be realistic and go, this person is not good for us. But Clapton would be the type of guy that would bail on any of that and just start something new, or go off to new musicians necessarily.
for sure. Yeah.
Hey Dave.
Hey Dave Stafford.
We've got Dave.
How you doing?
Dave joining
Stafford,
us, saying g'day.
Thanks, Dave.
And I think Great Vanzini's got a very, very good question there. So if you guys weren't aware of this, when they got that band together, Clapton said, "I'll get Jim." So, but he meant Jim Keltner, not Jim Gordon. But Jim Keltner couldn't make it because he had another gig with some jazz musicians, so he wasn't available for a week. So maybe if Jim Keltner had been in there, who knows? But yeah, wouldn't it have been a great thing? Maybe they decided instead of walking out from the Derek and the Dominoes, Eric said, "No, you're sacked," and got another drummer. Would that have worked, guys?
Possibly.
Oh yeah, quite easily. Yeah. It could quite easily have worked. Found a not Ginger Baker thing, but no, I think they absolutely could have worked. And sadly they didn't.
There was a chemistry with these guys, though.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So
yeah.
I mean, we talk about Zeppelin, where each member is irreplaceable. Maybe replacing a member would have lost the energy and vibe that's on this record, and whatnot.
Good point.
So who knows? I mean, it's one of those things that we'll never really know now. But if from my my limited experience in comparison to someone like Clapton's, if you're in a band where things are, you've got someone who's quite toxic in the band, your immediate thing is to go, I can't do this anymore. And with Clapton's personality, he would have failed.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think you can get on with somebody musically, can't you? You can have a connection but not necessarily get on with somebody personally,
Yeah.
And then you've got to decide if you can work with somebody professionally, but and whether that's possible. But I think yes, if Jim Gordon obviously already having mental problems, and as you say, Clapton, bit aloof, had enough of that. I'm gone,
It was
Kubrick, I think that's a good point.
It's like the honeymoon period, and then after a little while, things start to get on each other's nerves a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, and it is after that kind of first year, isn't it? They have a year, they do some successful stuff, and then it all blows apart. Less than a year. But,
So Carl Rattle goes on though and continues to play with Clapton through the 70s, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He continues to go on and becomes an important part of Clapton's band. What's really interesting though is that we saw a reunion with John Mayall a couple of years ago. We saw Clapton do something with Steve Winwood in 2008. And again, Bobby Whitlock talks about it. I think they only ever got together once, didn't they, him and Clapton? So wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be good if they got together? And you know how bands do this now? They go through and they do like 50 years of, playing the album again. Wouldn't that be good? I'd love to see it. I would love to see these guys in their 70s belt out.
Bell Bottom Blues, yes.
Yeah, I'd love it.
No, absolutely, yeah. An interesting point, yeah.
When I saw Clapton I think it was 2007, I saw him 2 gigs on the same tour, and he was playing a lot of the tracks from this, which I was rapt. I think they opened with I'm trying to think of what song it was. Tell the Truth. I think they opened.
Wow.
With that.
Yeah.
So they actually a handful of tracks off it. So he obviously a nod to his past, going, "Oh, I appreciate this now," and Clapton's in a different place in life now. So, looking back retrospectively, I'm sure that he appreciates the musicianship and everything on there as well.
Yeah.
Derek Trucks in the band, he was like saying that was like having Dane Allman in the band thing. So,
yeah, they did Tell the Truth, Keys to the Highway, got to Get Better in a Little While, Little Wing, Any Day.
Yep.
I mean, yeah.
So they played like handful of the
Yeah, handful of songs for me. Yeah, fantastic.
Bellbone Blues too, from memory. But,
And Layla, of course. Yeah, and Layla. Yeah.
Have you got some information there on some of the gear, Brad? That hey, Arvin, thanks for joining us, brother.
Arvin.
So, have you got some info there you want to share with us?
Yeah,
Brad?
I do, and I'll elaborate on that. Obviously, with Dane Allman, I mean, he was from the Allman Brothers Band, as we all know, and his main guitar at that time was a 57 Les Paul Gold Top, which obviously a very desirable guitar these days and probably worth an absolute fortune, which we will go into when it got auctioned. But obviously that the guitar got auctioned and it got so much money because it was the Layla guitar, but it might not fetch that much, but still they're very desirable era for Les Pauls because they've just gone away from the P90 pickup to a humbucker. So for people who are not familiar with that, like a P90 is more like a single coil pickup, and the humbuckers is two coils together, so it cancels out the hum, but they're a slightly fatter tone. Gibson Les Paul, he acquired that in late '68 or early '69 from a place called Lippin Music in Gainesville, Florida, I believe. He owned it for about 18 months. It featured on lots of sessions he did with other artists, but obviously including Derek and the Dominoes. And I believe that obviously it's on a lot of the Allman Brothers Band recordings as well.
Yeah.
On September 16, shortly after the session, he traded that guitar. He traded it $200 cash and a 50-watt Marshall head for a 59 Les Paul, Gibson Les Paul Burst, owned by a guy named Stein, guitarist of a band called Stone Ballon, sorry, which was opening for the Allman Brothers Band that evening. So he obviously really loved that guitar. Years later, I mean, I believe he actually liked the pickups though so much in that Gold Top that he opted to swap them over into the Burst that he got. But so that guitar in itself was obviously it changed hands through the years. That guitar, that Gold Top that was on Layla, and I'm just having a look at some of my notes here. It was stripped and refinished a few times along the way, unfortunately, but yeah, it was identifiable and authenticated through the pearl inlays on the 15th fret. They could identify that it was that actual guitar from but obviously been refinished. And despite obviously the changes to that guitar over the year, in 2019, in August 2019, you're sitting down, guys. This Layla guitar sold at auction for $1.25 million.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, yeah.
That's remarkable. For a refinished.
Who bought it? Do we know, or is it in hanging on someone's wall?
I don't know who bought it. Do you know? Do you guys know who? No, I don't know.
No, I don't.
I couldn't find any information on that, but obviously it's a collector, someone who knows, it might even be Joe Bonamassa, probably, because he's one of those guys that buys those. If he doesn't, he's probably looking for it right now. So.
Well, no one's playing Brownie, are they? You know, Brownie's apparently in a private collection.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. It's probably a private collector, and these guys at auction as well. They, you know, when they go to auction, they're obviously paying a premium on top of that price that it goes for as well. So God knows what it went for. And obviously with Eric Clapton's gear, he was using. I mean, we discussed this. You mentioned Andrew a bit earlier. He's using the Fender Tweed Champ, which is, you know, a Leo Fender made amp, because in that era, Leo Fender went across to making. He was making radios, and we all know the. I don't want to go too much into the history of Leo Fender, but he started making Tweed amps around 1948 to about 1964, and these Tweed amps were quite popular with recording artists. I mean, Billy Gibbons used them on Tres Homebrews, which is one of my favorite, like Lizzie Top records, and I love the guitar tone. Joe Walsh, which is interesting because some of my notes here, one of the songs which we're going to do next week, I said that the song reminded me of a Joe Walsh song. Jeff Beck, he was one of those amps as well. They're a Class A. They're a warm Class A power stage amp. They're a small speaker, and the reason that they're so popular, oh, you've got a picture there, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, so you can see that they're not a Marshall stack, like what he used to record with Cream, like big Marshalls and everything like that. He walked in and that was what he was using. They require no real EQing to fit nicely in a mix, and I think that's why they're quite popular with recordings, because they, even though they're a small amp and a small speaker, they, in a recording sense, they sound really big because they sonically they're not interfering with the low end of a bass frequency of a bass guitar and a kick drum, and they're not going too high in the frequency, so it's a real mid-range tone, and it covers that whole spectrum of mid-range from low to high mid. So I've personally never used one. I'm really quite intrigued. I'd love to try one.
I think Brad, what you just said is really the nub of it. Is that if you're recording, you've got a band in which you want your guitar to appear, which doesn't appear in the bass frequency on the set. And actually, so what you don't want is a kind of full range, massive frequency amp. Actually, it's not necessary, because what you're going to do, what you want is that fairly narrow thing. If you've got an 8-inch speaker and it's 5 watts, it's going to be in that bit, isn't it? And it's and I think that's what you just said is the correct. So when you go in the studio, not when you're playing live, which is different. When you've gone to the studio, although someone like Mike Campbell he mics them up. He has a Fender Champ, he mics up, I think, an old one. But you can see that would be the perfect studio thing, wasn't it? It's a bit like Jimmy Page using Supros, little Supro things to record on. I guess it's a similar sort of thing.
Well, Clapton had worked that out, obviously, before he took that into the studio. But, again, God bless Bobby Whitlock in his biography, because he gives us a lot of the technical information, unfortunately, Eric can't give us. And he said that they had those amps that Brad's described on a chair, and it was mic'd, and they had to be quiet, because they weren't particularly loud, and there was some of the bleeding that was coming through, which gives that album some of that that authenticity that we keep talking about, but they had to be quiet when he was doing the solos, otherwise just a cheap little amp.
That's the bag of it. Couple of valves.
They didn't have a bass, treble, or mid-range EQ on them. Tone.
No.
So,
and the pig nose just had a volume.
Yep, that's it.
What's interesting about that, and again, it's I don't know where Joe Bonamassa gets the. I think Bonamassa sometimes puts himself on planets, for some strange kind of reason. Because a couple of years ago he said that he knew where Cream's where Clapton's Les Paul is, but he said Brad Bonamassa said that Tom Dowd told him that he was playing Fender black faces in the studio, and in the research that I've done, I can't find any connection at all, because the blackface is a big amp, and I think we have to take what's his name, Bobby Whitlock, because he's the straightest, and he's given us most of the information at his word that they were champs and pig noses. Did you come across anything in your research like that?
None on the blackface. It was everything. This tweet amp just kept coming up, basically.
Yeah.
And basically, it's the Fender have reissued tweets now because they were so popular. There's you're talking to Joe Bonamassa, he's got his own tweet range as well. It's quite a gainier version of what was available.
Blackface.
Yeah.
So the
Wasn't a blackface.
no, well, don't throw it away.
Yeah.
But
But
that
Idiot.
the amps sound on that record is the Fender Tweed Champ.
is that what your ears are picking up? You know, that's certainly,
Actually, yeah, it is.
certainly what I hear.
It's making sense because, you know, even from a recording, like I record guitars and I use, I don't use my Marshall cabinets behind me to record guitars in my studio here. I use like a 212 box over here, which my Marshall head drives harder at a lower volume. But I'm sort of pointing. So that, and the speakers are diagonal, but there's a certain resonance with that box because it's EQ'd for 2 speakers, not for 4 speakers. So in a roundabout way, record like my EQ, like I've found the mic positioning. I use 2 mics, and I've found where I get that top end and then the mid range, and I'm not worried about bottom end because the bottom end you pull it out of a mix on guitars anyway because that resonance is there anyway. And for the style of music I'm doing anyway, I'm not saying this is every style of music, but for the blues rock stuff I'm doing and the style of music I'm doing a little bit more retro, it makes total sense that this amp is on that record. I can hear it in Clapton's playing, that poor little amp is working its guts out. It's working its guts out. Like the tubes are probably a boiling point. And that's what we went for on that.
Do you think that? Do you think that Tom Dowd was, because he obviously didn't go out and tour with that, did he? Now I can see him touring with some blackface stuff. You know, do you think he's muddling up? Do you think he's muddling up the touring rig with the recording rig in his memory?
In that era, you know, you're talking in 1970s. The technology's changed now. You can turn up with a little amp these days, mic the damn thing, have in-ears like a whole bit, and hear it. But back in that day, you wouldn't hear an amp like that on stage over a drummer pounding away and the PA with the vocals cranked and like that. You would get lost. So what I'm guessing is maybe he was using the blackfaces on stage. I don't know. I haven't done that sort of research for the touring gear, but studio.
No, Brad. No, he was absolutely not using any blackfaces when he was touring with Derek and the Dominoes. They were all showmans. They were all big amps, mate. And what's really interesting about Joe Bonamass's comment, and we have to take him seriously because he's an authority, is that Tom Dowd is on a video saying that he turned up with Fender Tweeds. He's saying it himself, you know. If you guys go and key in Layla, Tom Dowd on YouTube, there's a couple of clips here where it'll tell you that he turned up with these Fender Tweeds. Fender Champs. So, yeah. It's just one of those little things that, you know, nerds like us like to discuss.
I dare say Clapton would have stuck with that. I mean, he was a simplistic type guy. And obviously, once we get to the Strat, like, we'll talk about his 56 Strat now. This is well before any signature model range of Fender Eric Clapton models came out. He bought this guitar secondhand. He bought it in London at a place called Sound City on May the 7th, 1967. It's a 56 model Fender Stratocaster with a maple neck and an ash body, from what I believe. I'm just checking my notes here, so I'm making sure I'm telling older body, not ash, older body. So a few days before Cream flew to New York to record their second album, Disraeli Gears, he purchased it from Sound City in London on the 7th of May, which I said that, on 67. Obviously in Cream, it didn't really fit the overall sound, so they stuck with the equipment that they were using. I've even got the serial number here. The serial number is 12073. So I think that's, you know, for the people that want to know that sort of thing. It's an older body. And yep, I was just about to say, Andrew, if you've got a picture of it that you can pull up, but there you go. So you can see there, it's older body.
Nothing flash. Nothing
Maple,
flash, is it?
no, nothing flash. Maple necked, extremely worn at the time. Like the maple off the fretboard even was worn. But Clapton has been noted as saying he likes the guitar like that because he knows that the guitar is good because he can tell it's been played a lot. And basically, so he gravitated to guitars that had been played a lot because he knew that there must have been something good about that guitar that we played that much. So he purchased that guitar. It didn't suit Cream or his band after that, which was Blind Faith. He started using it in Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, and said that the guitar sounded really, really good and it suited them perfectly. So obviously he bonded with that guitar through that period because obviously prior to that he was using Gibsons and whatnot. So he bonded with that guitar. So Brownie became his number one guitar. So he nicknamed the guitar Brownie. He continued to use it on his solo album in the 70s. It's even on the cover of his first solo record, I believe, which it is definitely that's Browning on the cover. I quoted him here. He said, "I think Brownie dictated the way I played to a certain extent." This is him in 2013. "The Strat has less sustain. It's harder to bend on and harder to hold bends to apply vibrato." So in a sense, it dictated his playing style at that period of time because he was very Gibson orientated, which is a shorter scale neck. The vibratos and bends are a little bit easier to do in standard tuning. The change to Fender wasn't necessarily like just giving away on Gibson entirely, but it was just, as we know with his history of bands, he just wanted to change. He wanted something different. He went, and then when he obviously bonded with that guitar, that became his main axe. It appeared on stage a lot. He played it with George Harrison at Concerts for Bangladesh. And even by the time he's come back at 75 tour, he played it a little bit on stage as well. It was a backseat to his new guitar, which was like obviously Blackie, which I'll explain. Blackie was really just a guitar pieced together by him by three separate guitars. Just found the parts of those three guitars that he liked and put one guitar together. But Brownie, made occasional appearances up until about 75, and he retired both Blackie and Brownie at that point. Brownie sold at auction for $450,000, including a buyer's premium on top. On June 24, 1999, to raise funds for his Clapton Crossroads alcohol and drug treatment centre. And that was a record price going for a guitar at that particular time in 1999. Like, no guitar had fetched that much money at an auction or sale prior to that. So
in the Christie's book, they've got it listed for 80 to 100,000. That's what they thought. They thought it might get 80 to 100,000, but ended up getting 450,000. That's just phenomenal, isn't it? That someone's going to pay $450,000 for a guitar, and then how much for the gold top? 1.2 million.
2 million, yeah.
Just
the only things I couldn't find.
Yeah, Simon's got it there. Yep.
I was going to say that, Brad, hold on a sec. See. Sorry, I've got my finger around the way. See, if we go here next to the drummer, that's a Marshall. Can you see the Marshall bit?
Yeah.
In live, he's obviously playing. I don't know what's this silver one here, Andrew. Do you know what that is?
So that'll be the Leslie, the
Leslie.
the Fender version, the Fender of what they call it, a Vibra.
I know. Spinning thing. And is that a Marshall there as well in the back? Yeah. That looks like live. He's playing Marshalls. Still. Yeah. That's from the film. Anyway.
Yeah, well, that could be the case. But I mean, look.
Oh well, a live rig's not just his but
yeah.
The only thing I couldn't find about the guitar itself, which you guys may know just through the things you've read and researched yourself, whether the three-way switch had been made a five-way.
No, three-way, surely.
Anyway.
So
No,
Clapton-
1971, three-way switch is five-ways, not till late 70s.
Yeah, well, it was late.
You might have done it later, but
I think that was in the 70s, late 70s. But what I'm getting at, this is a guitar made in '56. So it would have had a three-way switch on it. But he's notorious for using the out of phase or the two pickups together, whether it was the 2 or the 4 position. So he may have been using that to get that quackiness that he used to go for. But I'm not sure whether I hear a lot of that on this record at times. I think he's using a lot of the middle pickup on its own, and I can't distinguish that at times. So
you've hit the nail. You've hit the nail on the head. So that's exactly what I think he's doing in the studio. He's using the middle pickup. But if you listen to the 2 versions of the live albums or the live material there, where he's using the wah, he's certainly got that matchstick jammed in there because he's getting that quack, isn't he? He's definitely getting a quack with his wah. So, yeah. You can't hear that on any of the songs on the album live. Well, I can't.
Well, that for me, I'm very familiar with Clapton's live stuff and a lot of his later stuff, and you can hear that 2 and 4 position a lot because he gravitates that back and middle a lot. So that being said, I mean that's something obviously on the Clapton signature models, they a 5-way switch, and he uses that with the DB boost for solos and everything like that. But that would have been a very basic guitar. That being said,
so can I ask you guys a question then?
77, the 5-way switch was introduced. 77.
Yeah. So if he's doing something different in the studio and clearly going out and playing a bigger rig through Marshalls and Fenders, and he's got his wah, because there's no wah in the studio either too. So obviously he's looking for a fuller sound live, isn't he? You know, with a lot of those songs, and I think that's, Simon, why that live album is intrinsic to this album, because you're hearing a lot of the songs that are played completely differently.
And like, I mean, all the bands that were around the same era, I mean, Zeppelin, you mentioned before, he used to use like those Supro amps in the studio, and then on stage he used Plexis and Orange and all sorts of different combinations of stuff.
High watts, yeah.
You're talking
A whole lot.
Completely
all of them.
Because when they come to a recording, it's about what sounds right in the mix. Especially back in those days, they were very limited with technology, so they had to find things that worked. And a lot of studios would have, let's just say hypothetically, Clapton might have stumbled across that Fender amp. I don't even know how he stumbled across that. I couldn't find in any of the documentation I found. Whether he just walked in a studio and tried it one day, that was a studio amp,
probably,
and realised that worked really well as a recording mix.
Or he'd heard Jimmy Page talk about the Supro thing as a small amp and thought, what's a small Fender amp? Oh, look, it's one of those. That's you give it. I'm sure it's quite easy to come up with a scenario where he's playing a lot of kit. He's in the studio a lot. We've discussed how many albums he's made. And he's been to America, seen what American recording studios do and stuff like that. And I'm sure they all had that sort of gear in them. So I'm sure.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much all the stuff I found on the guitars. And
cool. Really good.
Hopefully it wasn't too in-depth for the people who are not guitar heads, but enough in-depth for the people who are.
Everybody watches what we talk about, mate, are guitar heads, and if they're not, they will be. We make no apologies for catering to our direct audience. In sales, mate, you've got to know your market. But yeah, look, I think it's remarkable, isn't it? Again, and it's a little bit like what we were saying, guys, too, with that live setup on the Johnny Cash show. Very simple, very simplistic. Tom Dowd did all the work through the mixing desk, didn't he? And when we do the producers series, we can probably go on. I've ordered Tom Dowd's documentary. Has anyone seen that? It came out in 2003. Have you guys seen that? Okay.
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, it's not live or online anywhere, unfortunately. But yeah, I isn't it amazing that these guys just had the confidence? But I suppose Brad and Simon, these guys didn't have any option back then. It was just the guitar and the amp, wasn't it? So that's what they worked with. I think in 2020 we've got all this gear. So are we measuring by our 2020 minds what happened in 1970, which was just normal, your guitar and your amp?
Well, Clapton,
you had a wah-wah, didn't you? And you had maybe a fuzz, and there wasn't much else around then, was there, really, in terms of, effects, pedals?
Echoes and echo plexes and univibes and things like that. Like around that time, Hendrix was big on univibes, like around the 69, 70. He just
hold on, guys, I'll be back.
Gravitated to the univibe pedal and a wah pedal. But I mean, you look at Clapton's signature model Strat, for example, and it's made to be played without any pedals, straight into an amp.
Oh, absolutely. And I've got one there, and Brad's got one. So one day we'll have a guitar show, and we'll talk about our gear. But that tone boost and treble boost and on these guitars are just phenomenal.
And I have to throw this in there. Clapton, reluctantly became a front person. He didn't really ever want to be the front person of a band. He never wanted to be the singer. His voice is, his guitar setup on stage is designed so he doesn't have to tap dance on stage. They tap dance, hitting different pedals to get different things. He wanted to be able to do it at the turn of a dial with his hand while he's playing. His songs, the way he performs live, especially when he's got one or two other guitar players in his band, he's ready for his solos in an adequate time. It's not like he has to stop on something to jump straight into a solo. He comes in where he wants to. Like say, for example, let's just say he's covering Layla on stage and he's playing a lead break. He breaks into the solo for himself. He steps back or steps away from the mic and you see he rolls the dB boost up and he's off. There's no the trickery that might be coming afterwards, like when it comes to a live performance, the sound engineer might be putting a slight bit of echo or delay on his gear, but there's nothing at the back end of it. That's what I'm saying. The simple thing that he went for on that record, he's pretty much kept that going. He's kept that mentality because that's who he is. That's what works for him. A lot of guys, these blues guys, were about guitar and amp. There was the effects in between were not necessarily. I mean, Stevie Ray, bam. I mean, his first record, Texas Flood, was pretty much guitar straight into an amp. There was a chorus in effect, I believe, that was used, a slight chorus. But it was a big thing for blues artists to not really worry about guitar pedals and stomping on things all night. It was all about shutting the eyes and playing and getting that sound, rolling the volume on the guitar, having a good guitar and amp sound, rolling the volume. And Clapton's all about that. And he still is to this day, even when he performs. You watch him, he's got a tweed amp. Like you said, when he rocked up for Joe Bonamassa with a tweed amp and a guitar. That's his setup. He doesn't need any more than that.
No.
So have you guys ever played slide through an amp? And the reason why I ask is, I play resonator slide, okay, and my Telecaster is set up Open G, and I play a couple of Stones riffs and also Black Crows, with my slide, and I have to turn the amp up really loud for the slide to come through. So Dwayne Allman, when he's playing with the Allman Brothers on, that famous live album that they did, for example, or any of their live recordings, and there's a lot of them, his amp must have been really, really loud for him to cut through to the mix playing slide. Have you guys got any experience playing slide live?
I have.
I'm not a massive slide player. I do play slide in a couple of songs here and there. Like, say, for example, when I play with Appetite for Destruction, the Gunners band I'm in, the tribute band, playing with a slide and stuff like that. But that's in a standard tuning, and the guitar's fairly driven anyway. So it's like, cranked anyway. When I say driven, like the amp's cranked, so it's coming. But in a blues sense, or open tuning wise on stage, once or twice over the course of maybe last 5 years, in blues bands I've been asked to play slide. But on recordings I've done slide. But that's a whole nother kettle of fish. But performing live, I'm pretty much, if a slide's got to be in there, I'm a second-rate slide player. So. Yeah.
Are you tuning your amp up though? Is there a boost? Are you using a boost when you're kicking into slide, or are you just maintaining the same volume?
No, there's a boost because I'm my main Marshall, but that goes for all my solos. On my live, I just have a volume boost on my amp, so there's a switch I use that just gives me a volume boost, dB boost, not necessarily a gain extra not like a tube screamer giving you a little bit more push and a little bit more drive, because the amp, I like a good crunch, and that's about it. I don't go too distorted. You've heard my sound, Andrew, when I'm on, but it's pretty much for lack of better ways of putting it, that's all it is. It's like a channel. I've got a clean and a dirty and a boost.
Hold on. Sorry.
I can get that.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So you just got a clean and a boost. Wow.
I've got two channels, so it'd be like that there is just like a blues sound, and then a blues sound on steroids a bit, I guess, and then just that a volume boost, and that's a mod I've had done to the amp, just so that when I solo, I don't have to worry about a sound engineer boosting my solo. I just dB boost a little bit louder, so the volume actually jumps up.
Yeah.
What about you, Simon?
When I've played slide, I haven't played a bit of slide in bands and stuff. No, I've not turned the amp up at all. I've been fine. I choose a bit of a bluesy, broken sound. A bit of a distorted sound, a bit. But no, I've not turned it up at all. I don't know what sort of slide I use. A metal slide. Are you using a metal slide as well? Metal slide, yeah. I think mine's copper actually, but I don't know.
And I got this from. Apparently, this is an authentic. That's an authentic Dwayne Allman bottle, apparently. And
signed by him.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not. You'd be surprised how many people say, actually, this is, Dwayne Allman played this.
Well, one like it anyway. Was it? That's a famous story, isn't it? Yeah. Just going back to Dwayne's, apparently live, he used to play two 50-watt Marshall bass heads connected with 3 Y cables. Which enabled him to use both the high inputs of the channel and both of the high inputs on both of his Marshalls.
Okay, so that's why. That's why. So that's why he's got a definite sound. So he's definitely right in the middle there, right in the middle. Yeah. Because it sounds It sounds just in your face, doesn't it, when he's playing? And you listen to the outro of Layla, and he's just, oh my gosh. But we know he's not using Marshalls there, is he? So back to the old adage, isn't it? It's in the fingers and the slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably, yeah. as I say, I've never turned my guitar up when I've been playing slides on songs and stuff. Just it's fine.
Yeah, that's it.
Really.
That's it.
See, some people got it, and
Coracedon.
some people ain't.
The old Coracedon bottles.
Selective
What
hearing.
we're saying, Mr. Walton, is you have to practice more. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think when I play slide, I tend to my right or my picking hand tends to play a bit harder. But that's not.
Oh, okay.
Dane Allman's not doing that though.
Yeah.
It's delicate at times and then digs in well. So.
Oh, 90% of what I hear with Dwayne Allman, it's just I get the impression he's just playing so delicately. It's just remarkable.
It's all about the slide, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just remarkable. The touch that he has. It's just
The recordings, they're probably wearing cans and like headphones, all mic'd up. They've got a rough mix in their headset, so they're not necessarily focused on probably what the room is anyway. It's probably a little bit more that maybe. Who knows? I'd love to know more about that.
And unfortunately we don't have a lot of that information. In Skydog's book here, the biography on Dwayne Allman, it just talks a little bit about the guitars and the amps, but nothing really about the process, which is another step. So I suppose we should be thankful for something. At least we're getting a little bit of the technical information there. But I think that's why Bobby Whitlock's videos and his biography will be so important, because that's where some of the technical information is. But heads up to Simon, though, because that guy, Simon, who just came out with the Lennon biography, is releasing a book next year, isn't he, on the relationship between George Harrison, Clapton, and Layla as well. What's his name? What's the author's name?
Oh. Yeah, I can't remember his name. Oh. Trying to write it down. Do you want to write it down somewhere?
Anyway, so it'll be interesting to see what information he comes out with.
No, I don't. So I had some notes from our earlier stuff on All Things Must Pass, but I don't think I wrote it down on here. We'll look it up. Anyway, that'd be interesting to see. Yeah.
I watched Life in 12 Bars last night again, and I have to say, it really is a good documentary film about Eric's life. I mean, it doesn't delve into every single thing, but it's very good. And I recommend anyone who's not sure about Eric, his career path, like from the early days through to where he is at 2015 when the movie was released. Definitely go and see it. And it's one of those things where you recognize there's certain elements of Eric all the way through his career that he just kept repeating, even when he was learning from his mistakes and moving on. He just kept doing, and I think he got to a point where the loss of his son totally floored him so much that he had to honor his son change in his life. Is that what you guys picked up from that? I mean, we're not. I know we're deviated a bit from the record itself, but Clapton.
No, not at all. We're talking about Clapton, so that's fine. Look, I agree with you. I think it's a masterpiece of a documentary. I've got it on DVD, and I've watched it a dozen times. I think it's a very good point. It's a good point for people to go back and get some information, and it gives you an opportunity to go and dig a little bit deeper, because, as Simon said, we're not scared about talking about some of the negative or bad points in the career of some of the artists that we talk about. And Clapton himself talks about that, He talks about the difficulties that he was as an individual, but certainly losing his son. And I've had you know, and I'm not even going to mention them on our show, but there are some weirdo views out there about why Clapton's son died, but we're not talking about them here. But
awful conspiracy theories. Dear.
I'll tell you guys off air. I'll tell you guys off when we're off the show. You know, all credit to Clapton, you know, because who was the first guy that rang him after he found out that his son had passed away? I think it was Keith Richards rang him and said to him, "Are you okay? You know, do you want me to come over and hang out?" Yeah.
I think it's a very important thing, because when you think about his turmoil from a child, and there's certain things and pivotal points in his career, you can understand why he was so quick to move, like jump away from things. Like he jumped away from the Yardbirds once he was unhappy. There was just a certain element where instead of trying to fix it or whatever, he just moved on to something different. And the Derek and the Dog was a way to get away from a lot of the things that he felt the pressure of as Eric Clapton. And realistically, he talks about the fact that Derek and the Dominoes, instead of being Eric Clapton and the Dominoes, was really a way to do something different. And he liked the thought of a little gang, a little name, probably like Sgt. Pepper's. The Beatles called their album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. But he wanted to, maybe like a theme type for a band instead of it being a solo thing, I guess, because he did 1970. He did his first solo record, didn't he? So
well, that's right. Simon said it was earlier. Earlier. So he did 3 Cream records, a Blind Faith record, Delaney, Bonnie and Friends, his solo album, and this album.
He wanted to step away from and I mean, it's important that people watch that if they like Eric Clapton, if they haven't seen it, because there's a lot of stuff. And a lot of it's Eric Clapton's words, whether it be an interview he did or they're chronologically done well, and it backdates at a certain point. It'll go back 15 years, and then it makes you understand why that's happening. If that makes sense, I don't know. How did you guys find that when you watched it? I found that made sense, that they went back to say that in Germany, his second time he met his mother and the Canadian father in Germany, and that thing of where he goes, "I'll never trust anyone again." That there was certain things that they made sense for his career path. And someone at the height of their career goes, that's it, I'm not doing it anymore, and they've got a heroin and they isolate them or pull away for 3 years or 5 years? I don't know what it's called.
2.5 years, 3 years that he put himself into isolation, and came out of it, and did okay.
Alcohol addiction.
So are we on for our skip and play on this album next week? Because I've just noticed we've been going for 2 hours and 47 minutes, and I think we've done a pretty fair. Where does the time go? It's 9 o'clock here, so I think we've done a pretty fair dive into the album, and I'll be looking forward to. I suppose we can talk about personally what these songs mean for us when we go through and do our skip and play next week on the album. So are you guys keen to do that next Sunday?
Yep. Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Just one thing. The author is Kenneth Womack.
That's it.
The guy who's going to be writing Harrison, Clapton, and other Assorted Love Songs. It's called All Things Must Pass Away. You can pre-order it for July next year.
Yeah. So there's 14 songs on this album. So 3 guys talking about 14 songs. That's probably going to be. We're going to ask for another 2 hours of your time. another 2 hours if that's okay. If you guys have thought, if you guys think anything that Simon and I and Brad have said that's interesting or informative, and we've got wrong, let us know in the chat. We'll come back next week. We can talk about that next week. We're not saying that we're experts, but we certainly are fans. Thank you, Great Benzini.
Yeah. Thanks, Great Benzini. Thanks, DTube as well.
I'm joking. I said.
Yeah, so guys, Brad and Simon tell me, please, can we only do an hour? Please.
No. I can't talk for that little. It's not possible.
I'm lying. No, we've got a bit of an idea. We've got a bit of an idea how long it takes, and especially when we go, deep diving. But I think we're going to probably go for another couple of hours next week. But I, personally, before you guys sign off, I just want to say thank you, Simon, and thank you, Brad. You guys are awesome. If you guys were here, I'd give you a cuddle, and thank you so much for hanging out with, talking about a great album. There's a couple of things that I've learnt and picked up on, and I'm certainly going to go away and think about, because, music's such a big part of our lives, isn't it? And especially some of these classic albums, they never lose their shine, do they?
No, absolutely
Thank
not.
you, Elon.
And thanks.
Even if they were made.
Thanks for having us.
They were made in a particular era at a particular time. No, they absolutely shine out for me. Beacons of brilliance. Sorry, Brad.
It's great in a sense, because we do. If you guys in the chat don't realise this, but we all go and do our homework. We spend hours going through stuff, listening to the thing, making, and it's just good to have our opinions there, put them together, and then you guys contribute. It really puts it all into perspective, I guess, one little spot. So it's a really enjoyable experience anyway. So thanks for having me on too, guys.
Oh, that's fantastic. Brad brought loads to it.
Brad,
really good.
No, you're part of the family, brother. We appreciate it, and the fact that you've given us, some insights into, how from a performing musician, serves us well. We particularly enjoy that, and the fact that you're a fan. Obviously, no one's going to spend 2.5 hours sitting on their backside talking about something they don't like, do they?
Look, it's one of those things. If it's something to do with music and an artist I'm very passionate about, you won't shut me up. You won't stop me. It's great. So
well, that's right.
I'm looking forward to hearing you guys your spin on these tracks, like the 14 songs, what your opinions are, what your ratings are, the things, the highlights, the standouts. Because for me, I know there's a couple of things that I'm listening to it back the way that we are and really making notes about the songs. I've heard new things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. I've been listening to it over the last couple of days continuously, and I think that's the key point that Simon makes. And we take our homework seriously. It's good if you get the time to sit and listen to the album from the first song to the last song. If you can do that a couple of times, or if you can't, maybe you might listen to 3 or 4 songs and then come back and listen to 2. But I think if you get an opportunity to listen to the whole album, it certainly gives you a different perspective of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, especially on headphones. I'd say as well.
Yeah,
headphones is great. Are we next week? Sorry, a bit of housekeeping. Next week we'll do obviously part 2 of this. Are you going to do VH3 next week?
Haven't
Steve?
finalised anything yet about that. We need to talk about that because I haven't had Steve Anderson confirm that, but we're definitely doing Layla. We're definitely doing Layla next Sunday. Skip and play. The Sunday show up until Christmas is always generally going to be on. The Sunday show will definitely be on, guaranteed.
That's fine. Just wanted to check. I've listened to VH3, so you're going to ban me again.
Yeah. Well, if it's all up to Steve Anderson, I suppose, depending on what his schedule is. But
I thought I'd ask just in case. But yeah, cool.
Yeah. We'll share that link with people if that show is a go ahead. But definitely this one here, because we're all going to be back anyway. I'll be here anyway.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Look forward to next week. Thanks everyone in the chat for sticking with us for 2 hours and 55 minutes. Your stamina is noteworthy. So great, Razzie, Kubrick Lover, Alex. Thanks, Alex. Arvin, Ellen Forestine. Thank you, Ellen. It's nice to see you. DTube and our Faith and Sonia as well. Thank you, Sonia, for administering the chat and stuff. Dave Stafford, really good to see you, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining. So hope I didn't miss everyone. Kubrick Lover, thanks Kubrick Lover for all your contributions. They're all really good. We really like them. Yeah, and Julia Baldassaro as well. So thanks everyone for joining. Stay safe for the week, and we'll see you next Sunday.
And that's Brad's channel. If you guys haven't checked it out already,
check out
Brad-cook.com. Check out Brad's music. Our channel is sponsored by BradCook.com.
Sponsored by Brad Cook.
We've got a sponsor. No. Sounds good though. Sounds good.
I feel like the drummer who looks up and sees the singer in a mansion on top of the hill.
It sounds good. Yeah, we've got a show. We're sponsored by a musician in Australia. Oh, wow. Really? Yeah.
So there. Yeah.
And get ready for the Bob Dylan for Beginners show too. We need to work out a time when we're going to do that. Bob Dylan for Beginners.
That's the sound of people running away madly. Yes. Take care all. We'll see you next week. Bye. Bye.